everybody, and welcome to Flagrant. And today, we are joined by Trump's new running mate, man. VP, he's announcing it. You're here to tell us you're running with Trump. VP, what do you think?
We're thinking things through, man. Wait a
minute. I was being sarcastic. That looks like confirmation.
No. I'm going to see him tonight.
Really?
We're just at a rally to support him.
Okay.
And I love that you
tell
said
the
we're
truth,
thinking things through. Like, this is a mutual decision. I really like that.
I mean,
That's great.
my view is whatever role somebody takes on. So I've run companies, and one of the things I've learned is when you hire people, you got to make sure that everybody is swimming in the same direction. It's not one person's fault or another person's fault.
Yeah.
But if you have, if you got daylight between you, even if a company or an enterprise or whatever you're building, you don't want to figure that out years in.
Gotcha.
It's good to figure that out.
So you guys have synergy because he did.
We have synergy. I think we're definitely in for the same mission of saving the country.
Overall mission.
And the role that each of us plays, the role he's going to play is the next president. And the role I'm going to play, whether it's inside government or outside government, we're going to figure it out.
Now, he did deliver a headshot before the primary.
I mean, we're competing, man.
But you were loving him.
I was loving the country, and that's what I've been loving the whole time. Now, he didn't like some things I said about him.
Like what? What did you say?
Well, I think it was
show him that size 14, bro. I didn't know. That got a size 14.
Yeah. That's a well-built Indian, right?
That's right. I never lived up on the height.
Yes,
I was approaching. I was getting right there at about 6 feet flat, and that was not what a size 14 predicts.
Okay, but tell us. Okay, so he delivers this shot. He said that there are some things that you didn't, that he didn't like.
Yeah, I mean, it was a primary. We're running against each other, and so I play to win, and so we all play to win. But I respect. I've said it every step, and I meant it. I respect his legacy and what he did for the country.
Okay.
He kept us out of war, and he grew the economy.
Okay.
I think those are two of the most important things a president can do.
Yeah.
He also rolled over the log of the deep state, right? And we saw what crawled out.
I need to learn about the deep state. I want to get into all
We
this.
can get into all of that
It's
stuff.
part of my notes.
And so I said, one of my things is in the campaign is he rolled over that log and we saw what crawled out. Mm-hmm. I'm bringing the pesticide. And that was my view. Is
you want to take out the deep state.
You actually want to just spraying it down.
Deep state? Give me a name.
It's not you're missing the point if you're asking the question. It's a system. It's
that
a
was
system.
some good
It's
political
a machine.
shit you just did right there.
It's a machine. It's the truth.
But imagine in one of your companies, like you asked the people at the company, like you own the company, and you're talking to your CEO, and you're like, "Who is the problem source in this company?" And then somebody said back to you, they're like,
"It's the machine."
If you're asking a question, you don't even know the answer. I would listen to it. Nancy Pelosi?
I would listen to it. She's a cog. She's a cog. These are all cogs in a deep.
Give me some cogs. I want to know about the cogs.
Are you a cog in the machine?
I'd like to think not.
But
and I'm not right now. But if you get in there for 8 years, maybe you become one, and then it's time to get the hell out. Actually, so that's my view: is get in there, do your service, get out, know when to drop the mic. And I think it takes fresh blood to do it. I think you get to be an outsider, a solid outsider, like a true outsider once. And so that was my whole premise in this race: is I'm going to take the America First agenda to the next level, reach the next generation while doing it. Forget the Republicans, forget the Democrats. Build a movement that's founded on two basic ideas. I think these are not particularly partisan ideas. I think they're rather obvious, but apparently they're controversial today. The people who we elect to run the government should be the ones who actually run the government. That's number one, not unelected bureaucrats. So whoever it is, agree, disagree with me, partisan, black, white, doesn't matter. The people we elect to run the government should run the government. And the moral duty that they owe is to the citizens of this nation, not another one.
Boom, there we go.
That's it. That's the whole premise. And so the fact that that was as controversial as it came out to be in this race, I think revealed a lot about where we are as a country and gives me a redoubled sense of purpose to, if it's not going to be as the next president, which is how I hoped to make a positive difference in this country, I'm going to find what the next best way is.
Maybe VP. Do you think you're too qualified to be VP? Like,
I don't know that. I mean, I don't see things as like a hierarchy. No, President number one, VP. And I don't know that VP.
Imagine it's a caste system. Like
speaking to, familiar concepts.
No, but is it
casting decision?
There we go.
I actually call it more of, right?
Yeah. But okay.
That's what I thought you meant.
Yeah.
Which I refer to my former acting, my former comedian career.
That's right. I saw that you took a comedy class.
10 shows.
You did 10 shows. Give us. Oh, do you have a bit?
They were not very good.
No, but we would love to hear
about
a premise.
7-8 years. What was the premise?
The
premise. The thing is, the premise was just based on exaggerated versions of my life, right? And so there were. It was like I would say I have
target demographic.
I have no native talent for comedy. I would say that, but I was amazing. I went to this American Comedy Institute.
Yeah.
You know this one? There's some people who went through there who were like, aspiring comedians or whatever. And I just did it in the evenings. I had my job, and I clearly had interests that went beyond my job. Eventually, it's what led to me starting my company. But anyway, I went to this class, and the guy actually had kind of a formula where, without having native God-given gift for comedy, to still make it passable. Actually, I wasn't great, but it was not horrendous. And the thing he told me was, and this is how it actually led me, and I owe him gratitude because it's what led me to found my first company. He said, take a notebook wherever. Like, this is an exception that I don't have it with me right now. I've kept it a decade later. Still do it. Take a notebook everywhere you go. Anytime something annoys the hell out of you, write it down.
How many notes are about black people?
Okay. That's racist.
I self-censor.
Sorry.
That's right. It was the notebook was black, but there were white pages inside.
A little black book.
National
That's what
unity.
together.
So the beauty. Just think of the beauty of that.
That is such a beautiful
it's
country
like
we
deep,
live in.
right? And so
If you didn't use a brown pen, you was sellout. I'll tell you that.
that's right. I probably did. I used many
Do you
colors.
remember any of the bits though?
I not super well, to be honest.
You
It
need
was
some
10 years ago.
You need
It was 10
Alzheimer's
years
medication,
ago.
dude. That's what you need.
But I wouldn't know how to bring you one of those. I wouldn't be the guy to help you on that.
We're gonna get to your drug dealing days in a while. This guy used to deal drugs.
The legal, the more profitable kind.
Don't
Legal
talk
drugs.
about legal. Like, it's cooler to be like, I deal drugs.
Almost
Almost everybody on this, sofa, couch, chair situation has dealt drugs. Did you know?
Is that right?
Yeah, in a lifetime.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I'm not an exception.
I mean, the majority of us.
Yeah.
Did you sell drugs at all?
No, I bought oregano one time from a drug dealer.
Oregano?
Yeah, on accident. I thought it was
Half.
weed.
deal.
How did you consume it?
I thought it was weed, and then it was not weed. Yeah.
No, he did know. He did know.
Okay. Wait.
So
You being too competent to be Trump's VP. This is what my concern is. Is that like the last...
let me just finish this story because I want to leave people with this advice, especially young people, for being an aspiring entrepreneur. So I took the notebook down. Anytime something annoys you, there's a joke in it.
Yeah.
But actually, it's the best advice that I could give you for starting a business. Actually, that's where I wanted to land at because that's what led me to start.
Because your frustrations
biotech company.
will
Your
often-
frustrations are often rooted in something real in the world.
That needs to be
And then
solved,
your
yeah.
emotional attitude to that is part of what gives you the passion to, for a good comedian, apparently tell a joke.
a great
But in
idea.
my case, it ended up taking me in a different direction. So anyway, that was
Okay.
Seal that off. VP. I don't know if it's the right role or not.
Kamala Harris, genius?
She can, she's in charge of AI policy, man. I don't know if she can spell AI, but I think that she's in charge of AI policy.
Yeah.
So there must be something good there.
That's good. I
She
like
must
it.
be.
I like it. Good. Get the notebook.
Exactly.
No,
So I don't know what's going on there.
Pence, goofball, right?
I mean, genius, right? He's an
absolute.
He's passion, a man full of passion,
Love.
and a man full of
Bro, you know what was one of my
charisma
favorite, you know
and
my
brilliance,
favorite videos? It's
exuding
you-
that every day.
You try to convince people in Iowa that you believe in Jesus and the other gods. Yeah. Have you seen that?
I tell the
was
truth, man, about my
amazing.
beliefs.
You're like, we believe Jesus is a son of God.
That's what I said.
a
Jesus
beautiful,
is a
powerful
son of
thing.
God, which is different than saying he's the son of God.
And the guy's talking to a presidential nominee. He goes, "There's one son of God."
I mean, look, I will respect. There were a number of people who I met who struggled. One pastor towards the end of the campaign, and he wrote an extensive post, which was, and he's an influential pastor, and he's a good man, but he wrote, I hadn't met him at this time, part of a demonic cult, the way he describes Hinduism, and he recommends everybody vote against the member of a demonic cult being our U.S.
He
president.
wrote that about you.
Oh yeah, it was an extensive post. No, but I think those are the words, exact words, demonic cult.
But what's the justification? Like,
Well, I think people were just like stay away from him.
What did you
et cetera.
say to him?
I called him on the phone and I said I would love to sit down with him. He came out.
You gotta show up in
the
like a
middle of
red
a blizzard.
outfit.
In the
Some
middle of a
pitchfork.
blizzard, he came out and he listened, and we had a deep conversation on the back of my campaign bus afterwards.
Yeah.
And he brought he's a collector of ancient books. He said it was his most valued book, and he left it with me. I promised him I would read it, and I would. It hasn't been that long since the end of the campaign. But in his world, it's a book about the values that informed American history. And it was a signed book by the author, and it's not in print anymore. It's an old book, and it had real sentimental value to him. He then, after our talk, had an extensive post on, you want me to pull it up, actually?
Yeah, sure.
I can pull it up. In the case of Vivek, if God decides to use him as a president, I will have cause for joy and certainly support him and pray for him as often as I have for any other president. But what we are discussing is whether or not we as Christians are allowed to reward a candidate with authority and power in a republic. And then it goes on to explain why, even though he agrees with everything that I say, this is ultimately why no Christian should be permitted to vote for me, in his opinion.
Do you think if you were white
Yeah.
and Christian, you'd be president right now?
White and Christian? Would I be president right now? I don't think so. I don't think that was the rate limiting issue. So I'll call it like I did. I do think it was an obstacle for me in Iowa. I think that we opened up conversations about faith at like a level of depth that we have not, and I think the people of Iowa and myself have not otherwise and would not have otherwise gone into. I think many people elucidated for themselves what the distinction was between pastor and president and how they could, with conviction, understand that their religion was fundamentally different from mine, but were voting for president. And for what it's worth, it actually was a forcing function for me to get to, like, okay, you say you're Hindu, you say you're Christian or whatever, and you go about your daily business. But this process, I think, really forced me to deeply understand what the core convictions of my faith actually are. And so it was very productive in that sense, actually. But I think that there are a small minority.
From
I don't
your
think it's,
belief in God.
yeah, actually. Like what even the theology undergirding my faith. I think that that was something that I probably emerged with greater clarity of by the end of this campaign rather than the beginning, because it's a very frequent topic that comes up. And so it forces you to press yourself to understand.
I would love to hear that and how you change your, but what does that make you?
Rediscover is what I would say. Yeah.
How did that make you feel reading that? Like, this is a guy whose vote you want.
Yeah.
He's going at you for your faith, and then the end of it is masterful, all positive qualities.
Yeah.
I still will
That was actually
never,
the beginning of it.
I will never, and no one of my faith should ever vote for this man. How does that, fuck the right answer. How does that make you feel? That's what I'm interested in.
So I would tell you what my first fleeting reaction is what my total reaction would have been a year ago, which is one of fury, rage, frustration, and like maybe a tinge of sadness and disappointment.
Because I feel that.
Yeah. Okay. That's what that's sort of a microcosm of what my first instinct is. And like I said, like that's at the start of this journey what I would have said. Right now, what I feel on the other side of that is then pause. This is a good man, actually, who cares so deeply about this country that he has paused to think about how his own theology connects to the future of our republic. I spent an hour with him, and he spent that time because he deeply does care about the country and believes that he has a duty to fulfill in it. And for somebody who at least gives a damn, it's very odd to say it that way about a pastor, I guess it's a little bit, who cares that much, right? I'm kind of grateful, at least, because I think that he and I probably share a deeper care for this country and an understanding of doing what in our faith, you Hindu, our dharma would be, than most ordinary people living their lives, and then me over the course of most of my life. And so for that, I guess I'm grateful, actually. And I think we're going to be friends. I think he's wrong on his understanding of what the constitutional role of the president is. And I think, if I may say so, he's wrong on even what I think the Bible will ask of him to decide in the way he chooses to elect a president. And I intend to stay in touch with him. And if I do run for president in 4 years, maybe he'll have a different view by the time that we do. And so I guess that's where I am right now, is a profound respect for his level of care for the country. Doesn't change my view that I think he's just on both the Bible and the Constitution wrong on this. But a commitment to say this is a guy who I think I kind of respect. Towards the late phase of the campaign, there was another pastor I went to a church with. And something will happen when you go to these churches on Sunday mornings. Sometimes, more often than not, to be clear, what was represented there is a minority view amongst evangelical Christians. That is not the predominant view of most evangelical Christians, but I think it is a distinct and non-tiny minority. So we went to a bunch of churches on Sundays, and most of them, actually, what I would sense happening, I can't say for sure, but you get a sense of these things, is they'll almost soften the message a little bit to sort of be inclusive, actually, to make us feel warm and welcome. At the end of a prayer, even, if they're praying over us, you'll usually say the prayer in Jesus' name, amen. And then you'll also, often when we're there, we'll say the prayer and say, and all God's people say, amen. And I felt like telling them, and maybe I should have, is just like, you don't have to say it that way. If you end your prayer with saying in Jesus' name, say in Jesus' name, because that's what is most heartfelt to you. But occasionally, we would actually get somebody who also takes notice of who we are and wants to send a message to everybody else who's in that congregation. And so we went to one where it was probably the most pointed sermon that I have heard. But he went to draw and parse every distinction between, for those of you here who think that you need to understand the philosophy of Christ, and that philosophy is what speaks to you, and that's what you want to take away from today, you're missing the point. Christ is the way. He's not a path. He is the path. And he said, he gave, I mean, it was clearly intended that we were there, and the person who brought us was a relatively prominent person.
He was like checking.
And I think he was checking actually, I don't think it was not a rebuke at us. I think it was a rebuke at the person who brought us, is what it was, who was a relatively prominent person. And I think it was intended as a somewhat of a slap on the wrist or a rebuke. Not to say that we shouldn't show up there, but we shouldn't show up there as somebody who's not actually open to, or being there for the purpose of openness to conversion.
Well, I'm sure he's also looking at his flock and going, wow, these people are running for president and they want the vote of my flock. And me endorsing this man
exactly.
is telling all these
followers. But I respect this man. But then he started, and once he got warmed up, then it wasn't even on us. He was just going
Shots
scorched
fired.
earth. So he said, a few weeks ago, I gave a sermon. And I forget which passage it was, but it told the story. And there's a gentleman who came up. He said, it was my first time in church in a long time. He had tears in his eyes. And I said, oh, well, thank you for coming. And he said, no, Pastor, I just want to say thank you. You've opened up something in my heart that I previously did not have. I haven't been to church in a long time. You brought tears to my eyes. And I want to say thank you for that. And he said, well, what did you take away from the teaching? And the man said, I'm still processing it, but I can just tell you the feeling that I have is one of gratitude. And the pastor's speaking in the sermon. He says, well, I just looked him in the eye and said, I think you might have just liked the band. And it was just like, it's after he's just delivered kind of a scorched, scathing. This pastor,
what's his name?
I forgot his name. But he was, it was I think we brought it out in him. Sometimes there's a situation and you awaken your inner beast.
Yeah.
I think that was just, he was just going line by line of people from the congregation come to him with these lines, and he would just be ripping them to shreds because people miss what the actual ultimate point is that there is one path.
Black dude?
To God. No, he's white.
White guy.
Not that many black pastors in Iowa. There was one. I don't know if you've been to Iowa. I don't know if you've been to
You don't say.
No, there's some. There's some.
Doesn't have a flourishing Baptist community?
He was a black member of the congregation.
I had to wear multiple hats. But there was a black
They were
pastor.
probably wearing one hood.
There was a black.
I want to say thank you, by the way, to everybody who came out to the shows in D.C. I had a surreal experience this past weekend there. I posted about this on Instagram, but like the first stand-up I ever experienced was Eddie Murphy's Delirious. I listened to a cassette tape of it with my dad. I've said that many times probably on this podcast, you guys know this. And we actually did those two shows at the exact venue where Eddie Murphy recorded Delirious. So that was just an incredible moment. I want to thank you guys all for coming out. Thank you so much for that. That was incredible. And the Life Tour in America continues. We are going to Nashville. Make sure you get those tickets. And then we are going to Austin as well. And we added a second show in Phoenix. So you can get tickets to all those shows at theangershows.com. And I will see you the first weekend in March in Philly. Cannot wait. I love you. I appreciate y'all. I'll see you there. Peace.
By the way, guys, I also probably owe the city of Washington, D.C. a thank you because we sold out 6 shows at the Improv. I've never done that before. Sorry I did not. At the 7th, I didn't have time. But this week, January 26th and 27th, I'm going to be at Wise Guys Comedy Club in Salt Lake City. I know we sold out 1 show, maybe 2, so hurry up and buy those tickets. February 2nd and 3rd, San Jose, California, I'm at the Improv. I've never been there. Very excited to come. Very excited to perform for the Indians in San Jose. You H1 having-ass boys, buy those tickets, hurry up. And then this show, again, was just announced recently, so I'm pretty sure there's a lot of tickets available. February 22nd through 24th, Oklahoma City. Get those tickets and more at akashsingh.com. Now let's get back to the show.
There's a black pastor who came to one of our events, actually, and he challenged me not on Christian teaching, but he challenged me on one of my core principles. We have sort of 10 hard things that are true, we say in the campaign. One is reverse racism is racism.
Yes.
And so he showed up, he's a fit guy, he's a pastor. He said, first thing is I challenge you to 10 push-ups. So we pounded down, hammered out the 10 push-ups.
Yeah.
And then the harder question was, when there's been a history of systemic racism in the United States, how do you take that into account when you say reverse racism is racism? And we actually had, he actually was totally fine on the Christianity piece of this. He understood the distinction, but he was coming at it more from that angle. We had a good discussion and a good exchange that day. We stayed in touch. About 3 weeks later, he became one of our precinct captains, actually, which is interesting. And I think that there were a lot of just beautiful moments through this whole thing. And even with the other 2 pastors that I mentioned, I consider that progress, that we were actually able, I would rather us be able to have those open exchanges than to have that bottled up and fester with some sort of deep, I would say unhealthy, toxic frustration that sometimes comes up when people aren't able to speak in the open.
I think that's smart. Now, here's a question that I think everybody wants to know. Why does everyone hate Nikki Haley so much?
Does everyone hate, it seems like everyone loves.
Oh my God.
The corporate press loves Nikki Haley.
You mean Nikita Haley?
Yeah. Is that her real name? Nikita?
It's
yeah.
Namrata.
Namrata.
Yeah, he just wanted to say that other N-word. Found a way to sneak it in, this motherfucker. And he almost made me say it.
Just Namrata.
Set up.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
She's
but
gonna go with a normal.
Namrata Randwa Haley. Yes,
Namrata.
And she calls me Vivek.
So she fucks it up on purpose.
I think
1000%, dude.
I think that it's almost, I don't know that she thinks of it as doing it on purpose, but it's almost native and hardwired to who she is, that it's exactly how
Does she know
would
what
do it.
fucking caste you are, dude? Does she know you're a fucking Brahmin?
The thing is, it doesn't make it, for her, there's
She's
one,
not Hindu for the
there's
record.
one
She was
currency that matters,
converted.
which is power. Personal power, and do
So she
whatever
thinks
it
she
takes.
has just insane lust for power.
Insane lust for power.
And
yeah.
she is tied to the corporate interests. Is that what the
I would
greatest
say,
criticism is?
I would say it's not specific to her, right? It could apply to Dick Cheney. You could apply it to anyone of a certain breed of Republican, or anyone in the neoliberal kind of fashion of Democrat too, of the last 25 years. Is whatever it takes to accumulate an added ounce of money and power is what we're going to do. Use an ideology as a vector to do it, to project American power, which actually is a philosophy that creates American weakness in the name of creating an illusion of power. And we're going to fight foreign wars, and we're going to create a domestic surveillance state as a consequence. And you could put a D at the end of it, or you could put an R at the end of it. But it's the same philosophy hiding on the front. And that's what she represents. And so I think what's going on in the Republican Party right now is there's an ideological fissure about what this party is. I mean, what does it mean to be Republican? It's kind of a meaningless term, really. It's Biden bad is the closest thing the Republican Party's had to an agenda in the last few years.
Biden bad, Trump good.
Yeah, I mean,
That's pretty much.
but
Biden bad, winner good.
What do we?
Our team good.
What do we stand for? And so, I think we should stand for the 2 basic ideas I said at the beginning. The people who elect to run the government should run the government. They're the old moral duty to the citizens of this nation. Not another one. Simple. 2 simple ideas. But I think there's an alternative view that says it's the job of the U.S. to be the global hegemon. That's the global police state keeper. And in order to do that, we have to have a federal police state at home that requires under the table violations of your constitutional rights. And if that means tying your social media accounts to your government issued ID as a mandate to use the internet, which is a policy she's advocated for, that's what it takes. And so the post 9/11 Dick Cheney, George Bush, Patriot Act, Iraq War, fuming Republicans have created a modern avatar. It's called Nikki Haley.
Right.
And they're trying to reclaim this thing known as the Republican Party. And then there's an alternative vision that says it's what I would call kind of a libertarian nationalist vision. I think I'm the only person to use that term, but that's how I would describe my view of the world. to say that the way of the future is one of guaranteeing at all costs our constitutionally enshrined freedoms and to take care of the citizens of this country.
So
in the
Nikki
process.
represents traditional conservative.
I wouldn't even call it conservative because conservative can mean so many things.
Let's find the right word.
The machine?
I mean, I think
represents-
the
is
fancy
she
word for
the
this would be
deep state?
neoconservative.
But is she deep state?
She's a product of the deep state.
She's product of deep state.
She's a
Biden
product.
is also product of deep
Yeah,
state.
I would say so.
So
They're
essentially,
puppets of the deep state,
Okay,
yeah.
that's a great way to look at it because it feels as if, for the average person, that Biden is being run. Right?
He is being run.
He's being run. That's what the average person, but we don't know what really that means. Who runs him? Do you have names of people who run him?
It's just, so it comes back to this, man. It's the machine. You could
But what's
you could
the
pick,
machine?
You
Like-
could pick your Susan Rices or the Hillary Clintons or the Barack Obamas, but it doesn't matter. Because it's
currently,
like,
do we know who's doing
It's like
it?
the San Antonio Spurs, right? It doesn't matter
but I know
who's
who
actually
runs that.
playing.
Popovich runs that.
But
Who's
he-
the Popovich?
Yeah, so I think imagine if Popovich steps out in the middle of a game and the whole thing just keeps running as its own machine.
Becky
It's-
Hammond steps in.
It-
I know
it-
the coaching
it-
staff.
it-
I don't even know if she's not there anymore. But what I'm
but
saying
it doesn't
is,
matter who it is, and the machine still runs.
I'm aware it
so
runs.
it is. Here's how it works.
yes,
Here's how it works.
there we go. And this is not to go, I want to catch you. I don't think
No,
that you're using
I don't take it
rhetoric.
that way.
I'm genuinely trying to understand
Yeah.
a phrase that I feel like I've used without really knowing.
So at a certain point, the bureaucracy becomes its own creation. That's what it is. So if you want to take, for example, the FBI.
Can I say one thing
Yeah.
about this and how it helps me understand?
Sure.
So in Hollywood, before I did really anything in entertainment, and I was on the outside of it, I thought that there was these like organized meetings amongst people in Hollywood. They're like, here's the agenda. We're going to push trans. We're going to push gay. We're
Doesn't
going to
work
push
that way.
Hindu.
doubt
What
it.
I learned
I doubt it works
is
that
that it's people that are trying to keep their job.
Yeah.
And by trying to keep their job, they're doing the things that they believe will be rewarded, or very least they won't be
Yes.
punished.
Yes.
So is this what you mean by?
So there's a version of that. I mean, I think that a lot of what most people refer to as conspiracy theories, the ones that certainly are true, are really just an amalgam of collective incentives that are hiding in plain
Yes,
sight. That's
that
really,
we think
yeah.
there's these nefarious individuals that are holding
Right.
the puppet
There
strings.
is no smoke-filled
Doesn't even
room.
have to be.
The-
Yes.
You're missing if you're worried
Yes.
if you're fixated on where's the smoke-filled room, you're missing the point.
Right.
Right. And so I think that this idea of that you're not supposed to utter. The great replacement theory or whatever, this idea that there's an intentional plot to supplant the native white stock of the U.S. for a bunch of people crossing the southern border to permanently secure electoral outcomes to the contrary. That's conspiracy theory. But if you take great replacement theory out of it, you take the idea of somebody concocting this in a smoke-filled room out of it, and then you just look at the last 20 years of policy, much of one of the two political parties in the U.S., as recently as about a decade ago, said, well, immigration, legal or not, is going to be a key to securing lasting electoral majorities. And so that's why
now
we
they're
should tend to favor
incentivized.
this. Including even in the context of that was,
Right.
you can even remember the context, was convincing a kind of Bernie-esque minority view that was sort of skeptical of competition for domestic workers to sort of, it was a carrot to say, no, I know that this might like in the short run against some of the things you stand for,
Yeah.
but think about what it could open up in the long run if we have lasting electoral majorities. So it was earnest as a
Right.
persuasion mechanism that today, if uttered by people on the so-called other side, becomes a conspiracy theory when it's nothing more than just a
Right.
statement of incentives hiding in plain sight. So it goes with the bureaucracy. And I want to say a word about the bureaucracy. I don't love the word deep state only because it implies that it's limited to the government. What I call it, people don't like it when I say this and they say it doesn't resonate with people, but the word that I use is it's the managerial class.
Is Jamie Dimon part of the managerial class?
I think the people 2 to 3 layers below Jamie Dimon absolutely are, and I think in some sense Jamie Dimon is ish on it. So there's 3 classes of people. I talk about this in my first book, Woke Inc. a little bit. I mean, you got the creators, right? The actual, you could be a professor at a university as opposed to the associate dean of God knows what. Could be the entrepreneur proprietor who started the company as opposed to the vice president of human resources. Could be the elected president of the United States versus the class that sits underneath him. You've got the creators. You've got the constituents, customers, shareholders, voters, and then you've got the managerial class, who are the higher middle management bureaucracy designed to administer that which the creators have created with the intention of serving the constituents, but to make it scalable. Like that's the basic premise of it, in a corporate context or not. And I think we live in a moment right now where the balance of power between those 3 categories has vastly shifted towards the managerial class, the committee class, as we could call it, the permanent bureaucracy, or what we call in government, the permanent state. I think it's true in every sphere of our lives right now. I think it's true in corporate America. I think it's true in universities. But it so happens, and I do think it's the mother of all bureaucracies, it is absolutely true in the government that the people who we elect have almost nothing to do with what actually impacts most people's everyday lives compared to the permanent machine that sits under it and is fundamentally agnostic to the political party of who's on top, as long as they're going to keep the party going. So Joe Biden's one version of that, Nikki Haley's another version of that. So either of which is a safe choice.
Deep state is essentially just bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And your mission as president would have been to eliminate,
dismantle,
would have been 75% of
a jackhammer,
and that's
just like
why,
a chainsaw.
And I'm just trying to help people who might be like, oh, this guy wants to abolish the Department of Education. What the fuck is that? You're just trying to eliminate the bureaucracy from the Department of Education. Eliminate the bureaucracy from so many of the FBI. All
because
these
the bureaucracy itself is causing what? Is causing a separation between what the constituents want and what the executive.
The dissipation of accountability is what disappears.
So they know the managerial folks no longer have accountability to their constituents.
That's right.
And that is because there is this.
They don't even have constituents. That's the thing. They don't even have constituents. So I'll give it to you in a corporate context so we can depoliticize it, then we can bring it back to politics. Like in corporate America right now, and this is where I've spent my career shortly before running for president, is you have something that happened basically in original OG capitalism. You have the proprietor who's also the owner, who's also the CEO and the operator. Then it all comes down to a question of scale. So the question is, we couldn't scale that without hiring professional management so that the owner can do other things and create new things, or whatever the owner wants to do. And so he hires the CEO and the CFO, et cetera. And so there was, like in business school, I don't know if any of you have background, doesn't matter, but if you go to business school, one of the things they'll teach you about is the separation of ownership and control. So that was like one of the original sins kind of thing, where the owner is no longer the person who exercises control, and that creates what they call a principal-agent problem. So the principal is the owner, the agent is the hired hand, and then like all of modern corporate law and business theory and securities law is designed to basically address that gap. So they have these things called fiduciary duties that the CEO will owe to the owner, but eventually they start behaving badly in a way that just flies around private jets at the owner's expense and claim that it's a business need. And then that's where the private equity industry was actually born in the 1980s, designed to sort of say, okay, well, we're going to retake ownership and clean house. And that was like where the Henry Kravises and the Steve Schwarzmans kind of came from. So that's in the realm of capitalism. Then something else happened in the last 20 years, which is, okay, so they said the shareholders are the ones who have control, but the managerial class, having not taken it over at the level of the corporation, went to the direction of the shareholders themselves. They started to pretend to be the shareholders in the guise of firms like BlackRock and State Street or Vanguard or whatever that aggregate, I don't know if these words mean anything to you. Okay. I mean, aggregate probably most of your money directly or indirectly, 401k accounts, pension funds, et cetera, to say that, okay, we are the shareholders, but we're representing other people's money, and so we're going to have you adopt policies that actually are in our own interest.
Not the shareholders.
Not the actual shareholders who are the capital owners.
But since we're the shareholders because we're holding their money.
We're holding the stock, exactly. So let's say you're BlackRock, and let's say you're two retirees. You give your money over to BlackRock. BlackRock buys shares in, I don't know, Apple.
Sure.
Actually, that's a good example to use because there was a specific case with Apple.
Now they're using that leverage on Apple to do what they want.
Specifically on Apple and BlackRock, this is a real-life story in 2022, voted for racial equity audits at Apple, which Apple initially said hell no to.
Yeah.
But they said, no, we're going to vote for it. And then back in the old school version, if the CEO was pushing that kind of philosophy, the shareholders would say, no, you're the agent.
You're held
I'm the
accountable.
principal and you have a fiduciary duty to me.
Yeah.
But it's always a cat and mouse game. But now it's gone to the shareholders and they're like, no, we are the shareholders. And we're telling you that you need to adopt this policy. BlackRock, right.
Yes.
Because today, if you go to the SEC's website and see who are the shareholders of Apple, they're going to be number 1 or 2 or 3 on the list.
This is really interesting.
And so it's always this cat and mouse game where the managerial class is always about getting one heads up. So there's a whole private sector version of this, and 2 of my 3 books are about this stuff, and we could go on for days about it. But I use that as an analog, because sometimes when you talk about politics, people lose their mind. There's something similar going on, and I think of even greater import in the government, where there's a cat and mouse game between the elected representatives who, say what you will, still have to go back to their constituents every couple of years.
Yes.
Every 2, 4, or 6 years, depending on Congress, President, or Senate.
Yes.
And ask for permission to govern, Whereas what these people say is, no. How do we drain as much of that power as possible so that we're agnostic?
Who are these people?
The bureaucrats.
The bureaucrats.
Yeah.
So these people.
Absolutely.
These,
the people,
how are we
the people who
draining
work
as
for
much of the
Anthony
power
Fauci.
as
From the electeds as possible to make sure that we're agnostic to who actually gets into power in those seats in the first place.
So they're neutering them intentionally.
They're neutering them intentionally, yes. It depends how much detail you want to go into, but I can even tell you
all
some
the detail.
Okay.
This is very important because I think a lot of your ideas, when explained in this way, are incredibly digestible. And
The
that's
problem
why
is
you
cable
said-
TV's 30-second hits or
Well,
two and a half
can I-
minute hits.
Hold on 1 second. That's
Yeah.
the game, though.
That is the game.
You know what
and
I
I've
mean?
learned this, and so I got to get good at that.
I've
Or get better at that. Yeah.
We talked about Bernie, for example. Like I remember when Bernie was going up against Trump, and there was this real issue where I think like American voters really wanted it to be Bernie versus Trump, and I think that they were so disillusioned with
That would have been a good race.
And
that would have been a useful race for the country, actually.
I've like. And I said it was like, the Democrats stole it from Bernie with the whatever. But here's the reality. That's the system that he was operating within and hasn't tried to change. So if the system can break you or can sway using the, what are they called? The
superdelegates
the
or whatever.
superdelegates or whatever, that's the system that and if you're not breaking that system, if you're using that system, that is.
You become a product of it eventually.
Exactly. Now,
bring a
so if it's-
jackhammer, get the hell out.
Of
Drop
course,
the mic,
but
and
if
get the
it's
hell
30 seconds, a bite on MSNBC, this is another problem with the bureaucracy. You could even argue that is impossible to describe an issue that is this inundated with bullshit in 30 seconds.
Well,
so the people don't even know where the disconnect is between them and their
I'm
representatives.
sorry, but I'm going to interrupt.
Yeah.
I'm reading Woke Inc. I actually do read
You're reading it right now?
I'm reading
Thank
it right
you.
now.
I
I'm listening
appreciate
to
that.
the audiobook, actually.
Okay.
Let's be honest.
I read the audiobook
don't
for that
read.
one.
Let's be
I read
honest.
that
Yeah,
one,
I know.
actually,
That's
yeah.
why I was more inclined to do it. The book, and
How far into
you
it are you?
are chapter 8.
Okay.
You are one of the most brilliant people I've ever heard speak. Most people
Thank
are
you, man.
not you. I'm an idiot. I'm listening to your
about
book,
that, dude.
and I'm not. A lot of this, I'm just struggling to keep up as you're even speaking now. But I'm reading Woke Inc., and you take this kind of wokenomics philosophy, and you make that the boogeyman of corporate America. And I'm just an idiot who's listening to you, and I'm like, well, corporations, and you acknowledge it a little bit. You're like, look, corporations they were corrupt before, but this is the problem. This wokenomics is what's ruining the country. And it's like, no, the country been fucked. Again, I'm talking like an idiot.
Okay.
I think the issue, if you had made this about how bureaucracy ruins government even outside of, if you make it Woke Inc. and then you make the whole boogeyman.
You're framing it as wokeness
so
when the problem isn't just
You haven't heard me talk a
wokeness.
ton about that in the last year for a reason. So one is just to bring you context. One thing I tell people about Woke Inc. is, first of all, I probably the 3 books I wrote, most proud of that one just because it took more of an effort versus the next 2, you already got your flow going. But I agree with about 95% of what's in there. That's the first thing I will say. I've written 2 books since then, and some of those have evolved from certain of my micro views. But the other thing I will say is that was just a product of my latest experience. I was a biotech CEO, the story I think I tell towards the start of the book. Yeah. And there's a demand that I make a statement on behalf of BLM. I refused to do it. 6 months later, I write an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal with a former law professor, and then multiple advisors from my company are resigning. What the hell is going on? And actually, the corporate America was in a different and weird place in 2020 than it is today. So I don't mean to be defensive, but I don't believe I said that, this is really the threat to all American future
Maybe you
existence.
didn't. I'm dumb. Most people are dumb.
But it
That's
was what landed on my doorstep, right?
Yeah.
And so that was the thing that moved me to write that book. What I will say is, so when I
Hold
wrote
on, I want
Woke Inc.
people to digest this. This is interesting because I think a lot of people have looked at that book without even reading it as, he wants to run for president. He's seeing this woke wave going. He's going to write a book about how wokeness is destroying everything, and he's going to use that popularity to run for president. If you actually read the book, what you're describing is you were put in a situation where you could not do your fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders.
At least what I felt was the right
What
answer.
you felt because of this, what do you even call this? This like...
Social pressure. You could call
there
it
was,
that.
Yeah, there was
Social
a
pressure.
social pressure and a philosophy that was restricting your ability to run your company to the best.
And to be clear, in my case, it was a really mild example of it. So I don't think I've ever overstated that. In the case of my company, it was a small shade compared to what was going on in the rest of corporate America. But it opened my eyes that even in that landing on my own doorstep and multiple advisors to my company stepping aside because of my own views that companies should stay out of politics was an eye-opening moment. And I wrote a book about the reflections that came out of that. At the time I titled Woke Inc. and sent it to the publisher, the main criticism that I got, including from people in that world, was that nobody had heard this, not enough people had heard this word woke. So this book is going to fall flat. This is back in 2020 when we named it.
That's funny.
By the time it came out, a year and a half later, then the actual criticism was this is too controversial and you're weaponizing the word woke. And then if that book were to have come out today, I'm sure the criticism would be that this is banal. Like and you know what? That time they might actually be right. See, if I wrote that book today and it comes out, if somebody else gives me a book that says the same thing Woke Inc. has come out today, I'm like, come on, guys.
It's true.
Like this is tired. But it wasn't when it came out. It was intended to be read in the moment when it came out, is what I would say. And you could read it now for insight into how I think about things. But it was a product of my own experiences and a product of where I think we were in a particularly weird place in our country. The fight has moved on, and one of the chapter titles in Woke Inc. was The Rise of the Managerial Class.
Yes.
That's one chapter. We blew that out into a full third book. I wrote a second book called Nation of Victims, and then the third one is called Capitalist Punishment, which is all about it's more specific to sort of ESG and capital markets, but goes into this deeper issue of the managerial class. There's this author called, I don't know if he's on the left or on the right or some combination too, but Michael Lind wrote a book recently, and he was in the school of thought of this guy, probably a century ago, James Burnham, who talked about this almost like back in the 30s, where this has been a phenomenon that's existed for a long time. And what it actually gets to is, this is, as esoteric as it might sound what we're talking about, this is what the American Revolution was actually fought about. See, the American Revolution was fought over the idea, the part I left out about the deep state is the people who are believing that they need to drain the lifeblood out of the politicians, the most sinister part of it is, they believe they're doing it not even for their own good, but for the good of humanity and for the country. They believe that the elected representatives.
Altruism
Yes, exactly.
Actions.
It is a noble lie that has to be told that we live in a democracy.
So even if you call them deep
democracy
state, they'd be like, "What do you mean? I'm just trying to help you."
I think it's even one step than that. They say, "I know what you mean, and you could think that about me,
but I know I'm doing the right.
But I know I'm doing the right thing, and so I'm going to do it anyway." And see, that's what the American Revolution was fought for.
We got to stop using the word deep state.
I agree. I call it the permanent state, shadow government, but I call it the managerial class because it's not even about the state.
It starts to sound so conspiratorial. I really think
and it's not even about conspiratorial. It's really about this idea that there are these people with nefarious intent.
Right.
And when we remove ourselves
from
this
individual and nefarious action,
Yeah.
it's a systematic phenomenon.
Because you force a person who believes they're doing good.
Right.
Will not listen.
Believes the means are justified.
It's not talking about me.
That.
Can't be talking about me. I'm doing good for my people.
I'm doing what's right, and that's what you have to understand. Is these people believe that they're doing what's right for humanity?
This is good.
And for most of human history, now as I said, the American Revolution was fought for. Now you take a historical view. For most of human history,
Make
right?
that American Revolution point because I'm still a little.
So I'm bringing that in here. Pre-American Revolution, for most of human history, the view was, okay, the idea that you get to speak your mind openly as long as I get to in return, or the idea that we the people cause a government to come into existence that's accountable to us, where every one of us has a voice and vote that counts equally in like this weird democratic process where we count up votes and decide who's in charge and you get to vote them out, that's nutty, right? What the people would demand would cause humanity itself to cease to exist. That's how stupid people are, is the kinds of decisions they would make. So the American Revolution was fought on, 1776 was based on one idea, which is that for better or worse, we the people still decide who governs.
So it wasn't just an American Revolution, it was a revolution of thought.
It was fundamentally a revolution of thought, absolutely, which echoed a little bit and mutated a little bit to get to the French Revolution in 1789. But let's just talk about the American Revolution, which was I think the OG version of this. And the intellectual predecessors of it were like John Locke. It started in Europe. But our founding fathers, they weren't the most, they were brilliant people, but they weren't the originators, but they were the implementers of a vision of Enlightenment thought that caused the United States to come into existence.
They had a juvenile enough system that they could implement these ideas.
That's right. And so that's what the American Revolution was fought for. And so then we have to accept that we're the weird ones, actually, we as in America. Because for most of human history in most countries, even many across the world today, those that haven't followed America's example, That's how it's done. And so what you're seeing right now isn't this devious, new, sinister conspiracy theory.
To the norm.
It's just a revert to the norm. It's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's just the natural historical tendency. So we live in this anomaly, but right now this is just reverting to the norm of all of human history.
I saw you talking at when you were stumping for Trump in New Hampshire, and you likened it to the American Revolution, and I rolled. Because I didn't understand contextually what you were talking about.
That's what I'm talking about. I probably didn't explain it as well.
It's not about explaining it. It's like you said, in these short amounts of time, it's very hard to break down an idea this sophisticated. Like, think about it. It took us 30 minutes to go from the initiation of the deep state, just the idea for us to understand, to how it works in corporate America, to back to politics, and how humans have been operating in this way because it's constant. Weirdly, like, there's like a biological impulse for it, probably.
Yeah.
We're not.
There's almost a societal impulse. Part of it's native hardwired. Part of it's just the nature of human nature and how we relate to each other. And this thing about the old worldview that humanity would cease to exist, that's literally what much of the managerial class believes today as it relates to climate change. I mean, for example, you could pick your favorite one, COVID. That if we really left it to self-governance and we were serious about that, pick your favorite fill in the blank, the planet would cease to exist. So it has to be a small group of enlightened members of the managerial class that do what's right.
There's an arrogance
not just
to it.
Not just because they want to enrich themselves in their pocketbook.
Yeah.
Now here's the distinction to draw.
You're too stupid.
The Nikki Haleys of the world are in it for their pocketbook. But remember, we said they're not the managerial class; they're the pawns for the managerial class.
No. I've seen this.
So the managerial class cuts them in because those are operators. But what the real people who are the real managerial class, hardcore, are actually doing it out of a sense of benevolence.
There's a, and I don't want to completely discredit this entire conversation because I think it's great by comparing it to Burning Man, but I do have a point about Burning Man. Have you ever gone?
I've always wanted to, but we've never made it, actually.
One of the tenets is this radical self-reliance. There's
Just
nobody
India for
really
white
watching. But there's no one really watching you, right? There's nobody watching you build. There's no like constructor, like a DOB people going, how many nails did you put into this? Is this going to fit? Is everything going to work out, right? There's no traffic cop that's just waiting to make sure you stop at a stop sign or anything like that.
Yeah.
Everybody's relying on themselves. And when you're relying on yourself, you want to build something you can walk on. You want to build something you can jump on. You want to make sure you stop because there might be a car that's about to run in front of you. There is a kind of neutering of people when you have daddy or mommy around all the time, making sure you don't do anything bad. Right. And it speaks to what you just said, this idea of if you leave us to our own devices, and I understand Burning Man is super privileged and people have a lot of money and time, whatever, but it is people being left to their own devices to take care of themselves, and they're accountable if anything goes wrong. And when you're accountable, if anything goes wrong, nobody's going to come pick you up necessarily. You're going to make sure, you know what, maybe I'm not going to build this with too few screws. Maybe I'm not going to find a way to cheat myself out of this situation because I could hurt myself and I could hurt the people around me. So I think it does speak to what you're talking about, which is this like self-reliance has been almost stripped, and it's been stripped by an arrogance.
Yes.
An arrogance of they're too dumb to build the thing correctly.
Right.
Now, there is another side of that, which is these people are going to build something for someone else, and if we don't regulate the way they build it, they'll build it in the cheapest way and take advantage of those innocent people. That also exists.
Like as much as unions are a pain in the ass, they were created for a reason.
They're the equal and opposite.
They came into existence for a reason. The created implies that, so this, you're going to have a separate discussion about unions. I actually have a very different attitude towards private sector unions than I do to public sector.
No, public sector, if you're negotiating against the government, it's very peculiar.
Against the people,
and also the people, but think about it, like you're negotiating against somebody who's out of office in 2 or 3 years, right? So, of course, if I'm mayor and I want to get the teachers union on my side and be like, well, listen, I'm out of here to be governor in a few years. Yeah, give them whatever deal they want. If I'm negotiating against my boss, who I have to work for, or he has to hire me and all of the other workers that are part of this company, this is a 10-year relationship, a 20-year relationship, a 30-year relationship. I'm going to make sure we hammer out a deal that's beneficial for the both of us. But I feel too often what happens with people in politics is, just give them whatever they want. Who cares what the fuck happens to the state? I'm out in 4 years because I'm trying to do something else. And that's why negotiating against unions.
Public sector
Is different than the private sector.
Yeah.
I agree. All right, guys, we're gonna take a break for a second. Listen, let's face it, okay? We want a healthy way to eat, protein-packed meals, but spending hours in the kitchen to make healthy food is awful. That's why you gotta check out Flex Pro Meals, okay? They cook high protein, flavorful food and deliver it right to your door, ready to eat the next day. Listen, they also offer keto, gluten-free, and dairy-free meals to fit whatever diet you're on. And if you're really hungry, their large meals come with 50% more protein. Pack on the protein. Your muscles need it. They will thank you not only later, but right there in the moment. And for our Flagrant listeners, only, by the way, you can get 40% off any of the 35 meals from Flex Pro Meals, plus free shipping if you use the code FLAGRANT at flexpromeals.com/flagrant. This is way cheaper than Uber Eats, okay? And with this kind of offer discount, it's even more affordable than doing the groceries and cooking yourself. Think about that. This is cheaper than buying food at a grocery store and cooking yourself. This is the absolute no-brainer, okay? Next day delivery in the US, by the way. And here's another very, very special offer. Let me just let you know this right now. If you order by 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Thursday, Flex Pro Meals will deliver the next day for free. It's fast, convenient, no extra charge. Think about that. Your food is getting delivered to your house within one day. No extra charge. No brainer, okay? Don't let this deal slip away. Head to flexpromeals.com/flagrant. Choose from over 35 flavor-packed macro-balanced meals and enter Flagrant at checkout for 40% off plus free shipping. Innovate how you eat with Flex Pro Meals. Now let's get back to the show. All right, guys, we're gonna take a break for a second. Listen, today's episode is proudly sponsored by Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. They've been fighting for the people for over 35 years. With a remarkable track record, they've recovered over $20 billion with a B, $billion for their clients and have helped over 500,000 families. But here's the exciting news. Not only does Morgan & Morgan have their clients' backs, they got your backs too. In collaboration with us over here at Flagrant, they are giving one lucky fan $2,000 and 2 tickets to catch your boy, May, perform the Life Tour in Los Angeles this coming March. That's right, we're gonna be at the Kia Forum. So you get to come to the sold-out show at the Kia Forum, okay? The house that Magic built, the Forum in LA. They're gonna give you $2,000 and 2 tickets, okay? You could be the lucky winner. Cold hard cash, $2,000 and 2 tickets to watch your boy March 30th at the Kia Forum in Los Angeles. It's an opportunity of a lifetime, and entering to win is easy. Just text FLAGRANT to For the People, that's 484-373-6753, and follow the prompt for your chance to win $2,000 and 2 tickets to my show. Just text FLAGRANT to For the People, that is 484-373-6753. Now let's get back to the show.
Can you break down what you mean by dismantling the bureaucracy?
Yeah.
Because it sounds good.
Yeah,
but
within
So it
politics.
means, so it's like if you have like an 8-headed hydra and you cut off one of the heads, it grows right back. That's the model of incremental reform. That's, Ron DeSantis when he says, I want to fire Christopher Wray at the FBI. That's the way I view it, is cosmetic change.
What you're
that
saying
doesn't
is
make a
like
difference.
Christopher Wray is one guy.
Christopher Wray is
There's
like literally
10
one
other
dude.
guys that are gonna keep
There's
on doing the exact
35,000
same
other
thing.
guys.
Replace them.
35,000 other
Business
guys.
as usual.
So I mean shut down the FBI. So the institution known as the Federal Bureau of Investigation, what I call the failed Bureau of Investigation, because I think it has failed to even carry out its basic law enforcement functions on issues ranging from child trafficking to the fentanyl epidemic. Actually, the right answer is to shut it down. So there's always the risk when you're taking.
What?
Well, I'll tell you what the mechanics look like. But there's always the risk. You're going to take some risk. One risk is you don't cut enough fat. The other is that you cut so much that you also cut some muscle. You can't say, no, I'm going to cut all of it in just the precise amount. Because if you're bringing a chainsaw, that's not a plan.
Yeah.
Where I'm different than most people is I am willing to take the risk of cutting so much that we cut some muscle, but I believe the right approach will then to be regrow in a precise manner that which you overcut, rather than to take the risk of not cutting enough, which I think is an illusion. In some ways, the worst of all worlds, which gives the people the sense that something happened without actually anything of meaningful
But isn't that
change
our
happening.
risk?
What's that?
That's our risk.
That's the one. That's what's happening right now.
What I'm saying is that's not your risk. It's the people's risk.
But that's what I mean. I'm saying us as the people, right? Us as the people.
You said I'm the politician willing to take the risk. I'm like, yo, you're taking a risk on my behalf. You have security.
No, I guess that's rooted in the theory that he doesn't think they're acting for the people.
Yeah, they're not. I'm just viewing myself. I'm volunteering to represent us.
What's so bad with the FBI?
So I think the FBI has been rotten since its inception.
Yeah.
And it was the embodiment of the managerial class. So J. Edgar Hoover built himself and his institution to be effectively insulated from any form of public accountability. I don't know if you guys, here's a book I would actually really recommend. My wife has read it.
About anything.
So there's a book called G-Man. I would read it.
Okay.
It's not some right-wing screed, I promise. It's like a Yale historian, for all I know is a lefty, for all I know is, talks about the history of the J. Edgar Hoover
Can I just
building.
define one thing for
J.
everybody
Edgar Hoover's
listening or
FBI.
watching right now? We're going to use the term managerial class for the rest of the podcast. This is essentially the middleman between what the people want and the politicians that are serving them, or the workers of a company and the upper
I would call it, yeah, exactly.
probably.
That sounds good. That sounds
the
good.
owner,
the principals,
the
yep,
owner,
and
and the
between
principals or the
between
owners of the
between
company.
the owner.
So there's this system,
It's the committee class.
the committee class, the managerial class, whatever it is, but these people aren't necessarily working for the company. There might not in BlackRock they are, but they're not working for the government necessarily. It's
a separate breed of middle management bureaucrats. It's like the equivalent of who sits in between the student and the tenured professor at the university is the dean of.
In politics, how does this present itself? Is it politicians?
Three-letter agencies. The three-letter agencies.
Got it.
That's what we're talking about. FBI, SEC, ATF, CDC, Department of Education, TSA,
DEA.
What about
DEA?
What about companies? What about Boeing or?
It gets. So the way I view companies is they view these unaccountable nodes as their vehicles for capture.
And the node is the politician.
The
node
is the agency. So that's where power gets concentrated. It's in an unaccountable place, then it's just about capturing it.
So you are talking about actually cutting people at these agencies.
I'm talking about
shutting the whole agency.
Shutting the whole agency down.
Because the idea
Similar
is
to like how people said defund the police. They complained of how the police system has been running all this time. So now they're like,
I think this is a legitimate
pull.
So my view is on the
argument.
on the FBI on the FBI's case. There's 35,000 employees at the FBI, and there's the same FBI that 60 years ago was incorrectly collecting tapes of Martin Luther King and threatening him to commit suicide over his affronts or whatever. That today is going after.
He saw the tattoo.
I mean,
I fucking got it. He's been collecting information this whole time.
I like the tattoo. It made an impression. That today is actually now going after, I believe, political opponents who have a political persuasion that the benevolent dictators inside the three-letter agency have decided need to be quashed, just like they decided he needed to be quashed. So it's not a partisan point I'm making, but there's 35,000 employees at the FBI. 20,000 of them are the back office bureaucrats that are the classic, typical managerial class. So when I say shut down the FBI, those 20,000 are going home and finding honest work, whatever it is. And by the way, we happen to live in a moment where most businesses have more job openings than there are people looking for work in this country. So maybe we can kill two birds with one stone. But either way, they're going home. The 15,000 cops on the front lines, investigative agents, we will move them to, say, the U.S. Marshals, which, I mean, everything I'm naming, they each have their own problems, but they're not, as an institution, has not suffered the same level of rot that the FBI has.
It's not systemic.
Yeah, and the U.S. Marshals has been far more effective than the FBI in going after child sex trafficking rings. And, you can even talk about the DEA has a lot of its faults, but sooner I would move them to the DEA than keep them at the FBI to go after the fentanyl epidemic. There's a financial crimes enforcement network at the U.S. Treasury to go after the future SBFs or the FTXs or the financial fraudsters of the world. The remaining 15,000, move them. So that's what shutting down the FBI looks like.
How do you decide who's who? How do you decide 15,000 good, 20,000 bad?
Well, the 15,000 are investigative agents that are not sort of...
Yeah, if your job is
like
police officer.
They're like the equivalent of the cops, actually. So we'll use that frontline talent, but deputized by at least a bureaucracy that has not been corrupted in the same way that the current FBI has. And the current FBI makes it pretty nakedly transparent. It's still, for God's sake, the J. Edgar Hoover building. It's the name of the building. They're celebrating the guy's legacy today. So I would say shut it down. And I'm different than every other Republican in that regard, but I think that that's actually the correct answer.
But this is why we need like context for these conversations. Saying shut down the FBI is such like a volatile headline that when I see that and I'm like, what a ridiculous
Crazy talk.
notion. Like, what is he saying? Is
Crazy
he just
talk.
trying to trump up some fucking?
So you know who's good at this?
Sorry,
real
my
quick.
wife is the best one because she's not a politicized person. She's a brilliant person. She initially thought this was crazy talk. She's actually the one who found G-Man. She's just like, all right, I know my husband. He's saying some stuff that people say is sounding crazy, but let me just form my own opinion. And so she's actually the one that clued me into G-Man, which is, I don't think anybody who reads that book will come out believing anything other than, not only they're going to think what I'm going to say is crazy. They think you will agree with me that the status quo is what's crazy.
It's crazy.
And it's crazy that we ever allowed for the creation of an institution like this that was this insulated from accountability.
Your umbrella is not shut down the FBI. Your umbrella is shut down any actor, agency, single person that interrupts what the people want and how that is executed.
Exactly. And here's the thing, I can't take credit for that.
But real quick, just
because our founding fathers said it in motion.
the same thing.
So what I'm saying is there's 3 branches of government in the United States.
But real quick, so we don't move
4.
on because I don't want people to miss this because I think it's an important point. You thought the FBI was being used to, I guess, remove certain potential nominees or to tarnish their image, to interfere with election processes. Is that fair?
Among other things.
But
not just
just
election
giving one
processes.
example so people can digest. So
I think the FBI, I believe.
Yeah.
I believe the FBI played a role. I'm saying that decides we don't have all the facts, but based on what we know,
talking about Biden,
I believe.
Biden laptop.
I believe the FBI even played a role in instigating January 6th.
Okay, so perfect example. We can talk about both of those things, but just so people don't miss, just so people don't miss both, and I want to get back to that, but just so people don't miss the point. The point is, if the FBI itself or is being used to interrupt what the people want, and in this situation, it is a nominee. And if they're tarnishing the image of that nominee, now the people don't get the elected official that they actually desire.
Yeah,
and
based on false pretenses.
Exactly. And then that
best.
is the problem with the managerial class. In the same way it's a problem with BlackRock, with your
That
investments.
is one of many problems with
And
the
I think
managerial
this
class.
is another.
I think that is a very digestible way of going. So it's not even the FBI is the problem. It's not the letters. It's the fact that this organization has been used as a weapon to remove the freedom of the people to elect a person that they feel represents them.
Yes, exactly.
With impunity.
And if those elected representatives pass bad laws, well, that's your fault. As Thomas Jefferson says,
that's your accountability.
Yeah, people. Thomas Jefferson's great quote. I'm going to botch it, but basically he says, "The people deserve the government they vote for." And I think that by
if the government
definition, that's
sucks,
true.
you voted for it. And listen,
And he's the guy who wrote the Declaration of Independence.
And
by
the
the
deep
way.
state is essentially just the managerial
Disintermediating
CIA
that,
who
yeah.
can act without the president knowing, without the people that get.
And the deep state, and it's not in a critical sense. I'm just offering a descriptive sense. The deep state effectively says, yes, the people are going to get the government they vote for, and it's going to suck because people are idiots. And they cannot be trusted.
it's a condescension.
And it's bad for them.
Yeah.
And so we need to make sure that people don't get the government they vote for, because that's going to be a pretty shitty government. And they better get actually one that actually allows them to have what's better for them, even though they don't know it.
let's use managerial class instead of deep state. Just so I just want, because this is like
the managerial class.
It's, I think, a really important point that I think would resonate with people, because the average person, I feel like right now, is so disillusioned with government. And I think that's why you see like people going, well, how is Biden president? How is there nobody else that's out there? What the hell is going on? And I think that's why Bernie and I think that's why Trump were these two figures that got so much support, because they were both seen as outsiders to the system.
Right.
So people are disillusioned with the system. And the system is the fucking managerial class that makes me feel like the people that I am voting for do not represent my actual interests.
That's right.
And
so that feeling is grounded in truth. And it's not just a feeling.
And it
is
limits
an
the
accurate
options.
perception of what is true.
Like what you said right there with the FBI. If the FBI, if the FBI is limiting my options of people to vote for, and I'm just voting for the lesser of two evils, which I think both sides end up kind of doing. You're voting for, in your brain, the lesser of two evils. You have limited my option to vote for the person that I truly want to represent me. So that is so if the FBI or if any other three-letter agency or anything else is restricting my representation, I agree. We should have some way of taking a jackhammer to that system. I don't know what it is. But to me, that is a way more digestible Yeah. Does that make sense? Or did you guys know initially when he said
My
that?
question is, do we need some version of a managerial class? Are you here to abolish it or recreate it?
Okay, this is
I
good.
think that we go through these cycles in history, right? But I think that we live in one of the moments where the only way you're gonna slay the Leviathan, and I use that term, the Leviathan's Thomas Hobbes. I mean, this is what the stuff I'm describing, by the way, is like these are not original observations. This has been a struggle for most of human history.
Yeah.
But it's what Thomas Hobbes called the Leviathan is what we're calling the machine or the managerial class. We live in a moment right now where it is I believe, it is impossible to incrementally pick around the edges of it. I think right now the only available effective option is to take the risk, and probably there's gonna be some cost involved. Probably there's gonna be some negatives that come out of it. I'll be the first to acknowledge that. But on net, undoubtedly the right thing to do is nonetheless to come in and break the hell out of the glass and acknowledge there's going to be some inconvenience that may come from that at a frictional transitional cost. But absent our willingness to do that, it just isn't otherwise going to happen.
Will there be
And
a
it needs to
recreation?
happen. And so
think naturally it will-
that's up to the people who come next.
It's going to happen again.
That's up to
and
the
then we
people.
got to break it again.
And exactly, and so that becomes that iterative cycle. But hopefully, it never gets to the place where the scale of the wreckage needs to be what it is now. But the question is, that's up to every one of us makes our own unique contribution and imprint. This is the imprint that the next leader, successful leader of our country, I think needs to make.
Okay.
And then it's up to the guy who comes after and to the people who come after and what we decide and iteratively how we respond to that. Because then inevitably there's going to be some calamity. It's going to be how did we allow that to happen?
Yeah.
And then we're going to accept a trade-off that's in the other direction of that calamity.
Yeah.
Aren't we smart enough to have prevented this? Well, it was really self-governance that got us there. So this becomes, I mean, this is the human experience, right?
Yeah.
This is iteratively the struggle that like human history is all about.
Power consolidates.
But this is right now where we are, in my belief.
Yeah.
It sounds good. It's just hard to run on that because think about the 20,000 people and their families that are let go of just that one agency, and then the 30,000 here and the 50,000.
I've had people in the rooms with me being like, oh, like my uncle or my son is working in this agency, and I answer them honestly, which is that I don't think, and it sounds like a crude thing to say, but it's the truth. I don't think that the job of the federal government is or should be to provide employment opportunity. I just don't. I think the job of the federal government is to represent the interests of the people. Now, it turns out, by God, one of the main things limiting our economic growth right now is literally, if you're a small business or even a large business, the number one thing that's stopping you from expanding right now is literally finding people to staff your open positions. So that's the country we live in right now. And one in which we have the massive problem that we do, not to mention the cost of this. I mean, it's not cost-free from a taxpayer perspective when we're $34 trillion in the hole as a nation as well in national debt. To say that I have sympathy for many of the individuals involved, because as I said, it's not one of these is like a culprit and an evil person. But the right thing to do for the nation is for public service to be about public service and not about guarantor of employment opportunity. And that we need to live in a thriving country in which those people find employment opportunity elsewhere in an economy that right now happens to be hungering for more people to fill open roles of employment. And so you're right. You're having a political point. That may not win you friends amongst those voters. And that's true. I've also had many people who have come up and said, I've worked in these bureaucracies, and I understand that I would lose my job. But you're right. I've seen it. And I agree with you, which is also heartening as well. I'm not saying that's everybody, but I think that's, for people who have been on the inside, what I'm saying is not that foreign to process. And anyway, the piece about shutting it down is, like, I think if you do it in an orderly way, right? So I want to lay off 75% of the federal bureaucracy over the course of the first term. So we'd stage it over 4 years. We're not doing all of that on day one. The first 4 agencies I had said I would shut down would be FBI, ATF, CDC, and U.S. Department of Education. We've got, if I may say so myself, I would like to think, relatively orderly plans for carrying this out.
Please explain Department of Education, because that's another
Sure,
one that
I can explain
I
that.
heard your take and it was really smart, but I think to people it's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
It's just so jarring.
Yes.
And I'm sure for you, because you've probably read so much about this, you've thought so much about this, you've been in the think tank meetings with your people
Yeah.
where you're like, how can we execute this incredibly difficult task? it probably seems like an absolute no-brainer, right? And one of the tricky things about being a politician, which I'm sure you've learned, which is different than being a CEO, is when it comes to a CEO and I'm subscribing to you, I'm going, I want to work for this guy, believe in this guy, I don't even need you to convince me. I trust that you know what we're going to do, and maybe I'll go, hey, I think this is a good way to do it, and then I could influence your opinion. But when it comes to being a politician, you're going to make this change, and you need to convince me that this change is in my best interest.
Right.
And when I just hear shut down the...
It's because you're the boss, actually. That's what it is.
Exactly.
People lose that sense. And one of the beauties of this Iowa caucus process, I did more events than all the other candidates combined.
Yeah.
Which is, I realized actually through the process what this was actually about. If this process of like Iowa going first through this caucus system is about something, it's actually about instilling humility into the candidates.
Yeah.
That's really what it's about. Is you otherwise forget who the boss is.
Yeah.
Right? And so like I got some 27-year-old kid comes to one of my events. He's like, give me your accountabilities. What are you going to do? By 12 months, like how will I know you accomplished what I told you to accomplish?
Love it.
And it landed with me because that sounds like a question I was asking back when I was a CEO hiring people. But if you're a presidential candidate, you got to remember this is a job interview.
Hell yeah.
So I was like, this kid gets it. Like I'm really into that.
Also, guys, don't forget about Prize Picks. Hurry up and sign up. NFL playoffs is the best time of the year. This is what you got to do. I'm giving you my sing locks. First of all, this is a 4-player thing. So it's a 4-player pick. So if you hit, you can make some cash off of Prize Picks. First of all, Isaiah Pacheco will get more than 63.5 rushing yards. Patrick Mahomes will get more than 248.5 passing yards. Travis Kelce, I love you. I love what you're doing with Taylor Swift, but I think you're going to get less than 65 receiving yards. And Lamar Jackson, MVP, I think you're going to get more than 212 passing yards. And sign up for prizepicks.com. Use that promo code Schultz. They will match your initial deposit up to $100. So you put in $100, you get $100 for free. Now let's get back to this episode of Vivek Ramaswamy.
But anyway, we'll say one of the Department of Education. And I want to come back to your point about the political, because there's something important I want to say about that. But you asked about Department of Education. So the Department of Education, let's go to why it was created in the first place. Here's the thing with some of these agencies is they were created with often understandable intentions, but they should have been a task force rather than an agency. A task force folds up and moves on when it's completed its purpose. This was created in the post-desegregation era, immediately after desegregation and civil rights movement, to make sure that Southern states were not siphoning money from predominantly black school
areas,
districts to white school districts. And that was, in some measure at least, happening in certain areas. So that's why the Department of Education was created. I would never create a bureaucracy to solve this problem because you know where that road ends. But at least say what you will, that was the intention of having created it. What it then became iteratively was, okay, that's not happening anymore, but the bureaucracy still has to live on. And any institution that continues to exist after it has achieved success, ends up becoming a rot of itself. It's what happened to the UN. It's what happened to, I think, NATO. But we can talk about each of these. It's what happened to the Department of Education.
We'll get there.
And so what happens with the Department of Education is they then start to focus on, okay, but how do we ensure equality in other ways? It's not just the funds. How are we going to ensure equality in other ways? That's where a lot of the affirmative action and the racial quota systems and what became the modern DEI agenda and anti-racism says there are certain things that you have to adopt as a school. We have an $80 billion budget. About 10% of public school budgets come from the Department of Education. 10% of most local schools, their budget comes from a grant from the Department of Education. But the U.S. Department of Education says you don't get that money unless you teach or adopt X, Y, or Z. A lot of those include hiring quotas, race, gender, et cetera, increasingly with respect to gender and sexual identity as well. Actually, there's some schools in the Midwest that wanted to teach archery or hunting. They say actually you don't get that money if that is part of your curriculum. So they start to play a centralized God over what does or doesn't end up in the curriculum.
And here you have the managerial class.
It's the managerial class at its finest.
Because those people that work there are not elected, right?
They're not elected. Are you kidding me?
So this is a perfect example of what you're talking about.
Totally.
The managerial class comes in, they dictate policy, and that policy is not being dictated by the people who should be represented at all. They're electing officials that might go against what the Department of Education wants for these schools, and the Department of Education is still leveraging their power and resources on these schools.
And they'll look at those congressmen in the eye and say, yes, sir, and then just continue to do exactly what they were going to do, regardless of what those congresspeople told them to do. And so what I say is that $80 billion, instead just give that back directly to the states and to the people.
Put
it in the pockets of parents, right? who then get to decide where they send their kids to schools. And while we're doing school choice, we might as well go on steroids here. We're in New York City right now having this conversation. In New York City, the worst schools are the ones that spend the most money. It's actually true across the country too. So a bad public school in the city spends about $40,000 per student per year. Good ones in this city, charter schools and otherwise, will be closer to $15,000 per student per year. So imagine if you have that money coming back from the Department of Education to some family in Queens or Brooklyn or Bronx or Manhattan, for that matter, it doesn't matter. And they're able to now be empowered to choose where they send their kid to school. 90% of the time, if they're switching their kid from the bad school to the good one, they're sending them to a school that actually spends less money per student. So while we're at it, I'm just saying, let's do this. Let the parent let the kid take half the difference with them. So if it's $40,000 at a crappy public school and $15,000 here, let's just say even it's $20,000 for even numbers. The kid gets to take $10,000, put in the investment account. If you start in kindergarten and that's compounding, that kid graduates with a $250,000 graduation
College,
gift.
done. See you later.
College and then some. Or not college and start a business or become an electrician or go to one-year school. And there's a part of the Department of Education in recent years, is there some good that the Department of Education arguably does? There's some that is in vocational training. Fine, move that to the Department of Labor, where it belongs anyway.
Quick question.
So that's how we would organize
Why do the
this.
bad schools spend more? How does that happen?
So it's actually the teachers' union's bureaucracy, a separate managerial class.
Within the managerial class.
It's like a separate. I mean, it's one horizontal managerial class.
And this is a verifiable fact, or this is like the
the teachers' unions. The verifiable fact is the thing. Schools with unionized teachers actually have demonstrably poorer results at a demonstrably higher cost.
But that's not a function of the union. That's a function of like what schools those.
Yeah, there's a lot. So when you're saying demonstrable, I'm just going to give you the facts that are going on. But I believe there's a causal role here, where swimming in that level of money breeds excess. So leave the teachers' unions or et cetera out of it.
Yeah.
But swimming in that amount of money without accountability, that money's not tied to the performance they deliver or anything else. It's just what's coming on from on high via the state. In this case, the state of New York. The schools that are actually running on less money are the ones actually delivering better results on a per student basis. Most private schools spend less money per student than the public schools. You take these elite, ultra elite New York schools out of it because they skew the averages based on how expensive they are, but that's a distortion because people have a lot of expendable income here and they're bilking billionaires who don't care about a $60,000 versus $40,000 tuition. But across the country, broadly
Also,
speaking,
there's scarcity with those schools.
So that's a little bit of an anomaly here in New York City, but across the board, 90% of the time, if you're switching your kid from a bad school to a better one, you're switching to a school that spends less money per student on a per student basis.
Now, I'm sure there's many reasons
Fascinating.
for that. But the one tricky thing is, I think that Americans are abundantly aware of these organizations, but not really clear what they do. So when we hear abolish, we go, well, don't we need that shit?
Yeah.
So with the Department of Education, let's say the Department of Education is abolished. How do we have some sort of agreed upon curriculum that will educate the students to a sufficient level where they can succeed at government regulated tests and then get into the universities of their choice?
So I think national standardized testing, and it doesn't have to be run by the government across the board, is an acceptable norm
testing,
that
but
can
like
continue.
the actual curriculum, and that's twofold. How do we make sure that we're teaching our kids? Because you can look at this
the
in two
basic
ways.
minimums they need to know.
And also, like, this is going to sound fucked up, but like there is a version of American history that you could also say is bastardized. But I think there's an important version of American history, like teaching the value of the Constitution, teaching Americans like why they're part of this great experiment, and instilling
civic
pride.
education.
If that's really important.
You know, one of the most controversial parts of my campaign platform was, and I stand by it, is I think every high school senior who graduates from high school should have to pass the same civics test that every immigrant has to pass in order to become a voting citizen of the
my
country.
mom just became an.
Did she? She passed the test.
It's not that hard a test.
It shouldn't be. I met a 10-year-old girl in Iowa who heard about the controversy. She brought one of the tests to me. It was 100 questions. She got 100 out of 100, 60% to pass. Of course, she's 10 years old. But there are questions that you wouldn't be shocked that most Americans would fail because that's what happens today if you ask most Americans to take it. How many branches of government are there? What branch of government does the U.S. president lead? Probably some of the harder questions are, who are three people who wrote the Federalist Papers or whatever. We could sort of go down the list. But
you lost me on that last one.
That's 60%.
That was good till then.
You didn't see Hamilton? Come
60%. 60% is a passing score, right? Yeah. And what they do actually for the immigrant population is there's 100 questions, they pick 10. 6 out of 10 gets you through.
Yeah.
This girl, 10 years old, she took 100.
And she
question
just
test, you get 100
blazed
out of
it.
100.
Yeah.
But I don't think that that's too much to demand of ourselves as citizens. Now, some of this falls on the families. I think it does. I think all education begins with the family, and I do think that there's no escaping the reality that some of that accountability still has to rest at the level of the individual family. And I think part of what happened is you were given the example earlier of that sort of general loss of individual accountability. I think there's a lot to that story where, and one of the things I said in the campaign as well, it made some people upset, but the nuclear family is still the greatest form of governance known to mankind. Even go back to the days of Aristotle. You have the man, the individual man who's part of a family, the household. The household was ultimately the form of government, really. And then you have a broader form of government that takes the existence of the household into account. It's been the part of the building block of every great country known to humanity in our history. And so I do think that the abandonment of the project of the family, and like giving up on that and believing we have to fill in substitutes for it, actually gets it backwards versus saying we have a system that puts that accountability and empowerment.
This is the same thing.
Empowerment and accountability go together at the level of the family.
We're basic, sorry, but it's the same thing we're speaking to. It's like, hey, you guys aren't smart enough to raise your kids.
Yep.
Hey, you guys are too stupid to have a strong nuclear family. We'll do it for you.
We'll do it for you. That's what this is
instill all
about.
You guys are
That's
too
what this,
stupid.
And that's what the modern Department of Education is all
so
about.
Irritating.
Now, are you going to find, that what makes it tough is, because just to see the other side, you're always going to find, right, a kid who grew up in some like truly broken family and like the father's some, I don't know, people do bad things. I can make up whatever story you want. It's probably going to be a real story that's out there somewhere. Abusing kid, this or that.
Yeah.
And to say that, well, what about that kid? And so I think we got to really understand what makes the argument for the managerial class compelling is that there will always be that failure of individual accountability. But I would still rather, but this is what the American Revolution was again fought for, is to say that and remember what I told you this even about 20 minutes ago when we were talking about this, for better or for worse, we the people still
and that's
create a government that's
that
accountable
is a fucking
to us.
Tough argument to sell, man, because now you're talking about a kid that grew up in a broken family. That kid's got hope.
And I'm raising the hard case on purpose because we got to at least understand exactly what that best argument is. And so my view is, after that, find the minimally invasive solution that solves for actually the worst cases that need to be dealt with, rather than a permanent bureaucracy that's a superset that assumes that to be the
Do you
norm.
have that solution in mind?
So for that particular case, a lot of those are going to be legal violations under existing law anyway. Like if I use the case of somebody's abuse, like that's a guy breaking the law as it exists. Should we have a foster care system that itself is debureaucratized? Yes. Actually, most adoption and foster care systems are themselves suffering from the existence of a managerial class that has caused those to be less effective than they are today, too. And so we can keep playing this forward. But as a person who's the advocate and the staunchest advocate for my debureaucratization view there is, I also want to be the first to acknowledge that there will always be, because it's not honest otherwise, there will always be some possibility of a trade-off. And you want to minimize that to the fullest extent possible. But life and structuring a society like it is about making choices. And for me, the American way is that we choose self-governance and individual responsibility as our way. And the less self-governance we have, the more lifeblood we suck out of that individual responsibility. The point I want to make earlier, though, to your point about the political piece of this is hard to sell. In the context of the Republican primary, I would just love for you guys, and I don't know how you would characterize your viewership base, but how would you characterize your viewership base? Like what kind of people?
Awesome.
Who knows?
Large penises.
Large
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 penises.
shoes, large shoe size. Large
Really big
Size
cocks,
15.
man. It's
size 14s in there.
Sick dudes.
So all right, understanding that. So I think what I would say is, maybe there's people from a lot of different buckets. Let's assume that. So I've been educated in some pretty elite institutions. I didn't grow up in elite America, but I've lived it.
Yeah.
I think most people, and I appreciated your humility in this conversation. I don't know a lot about a lot of things, but I know about the things I care about. But you're asking me very curious questions about my views here. But what I will say is most people who will wear a MAGA hat on a given day, not all, but most,
one of my events, or
MAGA?
at a Trump
MAGA
rally.
was crazy.
Yeah.
Yo.
Well,
I didn't want to
Turn it
interrupt the
into
flow, but
Kamala or something like that.
MAGA.
It's MAGA.
Either way, works fine. It's fine. Potato,
that's wild.
Potato, potato.
They've been switching it.
No.
Yeah, in the news they say MAGA.
They say MAGA now?
Yeah.
Why? What happened?
That sounds so Yankee, bro.
Yeah, America first.
MAGA, yo.
MAGA.
But-
MAGA.
Y'all, MAGA.
I'm gonna stick to my version. But
Yeah.
but it's free country.
Not you get this.
So most actually it's gonna be a more free country when we're through. But I'm picking like an image of somebody who like the news media will write off or whatever, and people who I've gone to school with or whatever that will view as like the rubes across the country. The concepts I'm describing have a deep scholarly history that many people would have studied in the Harvard Political Science Department without recognizing it. I think most people, when I'm talking about shut down the deep state, what you may mistake for, I'm being presumptive here, maybe you don't, but what you may mistake for being just I'm saying something here that sounds nuanced, but then I'm saying something there that sounds like red meat, and people are cheering in the audience. It is my firm conviction, having not just spoken to audiences, but like we've been doing this 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. for a year, and even heading in the period running into presidents for launching my books and stuff for a couple of years, you could say. I think most people who are applauding at that know why they're applauding at that. I think they deeply understand the essence of what's going on in the country. I'd say about 2/3. Okay, that's what I would say. And so politically, actually, the thing that was challenging for me in this was not the handful of people who would say, my son or my father-in-law is going to lose his job because of this. In fact, many of them still would say, but I still agree with you that it's the right thing. The real challenge is actually many people in the America First base who love the things I'm saying, I think fundamentally just didn't trust me completely. I think largely because I'm new. There's a lot of things that are different about me, but not hadn't heard of me or new on the scene, versus saying that even though the things I'm saying and my commitments were I to be president would be going further than Trump in this direction of dismantling these bureaucracies and more aligned with what people want to see. I think the trust factor was, the gap that stopped it from happening this time around. And I think that that's fair. If most people hadn't heard of me, 9 months ago.
I think the wording was too radical, and that created a distrust.
I think there was a lot of things that created a distrust. I think that I talk really fast.
Your brown fucking head.
I think there's a full package.
Can I tell you my distrust as a brown guy? It felt like this guy doesn't like. Now I see you don't really love either political party. Why is he running right and seemingly catering to this far right group with terms like deep state, with tenets of 10 like reverse racism is still racism? And I'm not
Okay, I found this on the web for term like deep state.
They're listening.
this bitch got me serious. That was
Nikki Haley.
Yeah, BlackRock interrupted my flow. But I was just like, it seems like he's catering to. I don't like anybody catering to either extreme. I hate it. But I felt like he's catering to a group of people that just aren't gonna vote for him. And as a brown dude, even hearing that story, man, that broke my fucking heart, made me want to cry. Like, you're sitting here talking to this pastor who's like, I'd never vote for somebody who doesn't have my faith. And I'm looking at you like, why is he doing that?
I tell you, man, this is a good-hearted person who cares about the country. It comes from a place of care about the country, even though he'll disagree about that. I'm not going to cater to anybody. And actually, speaking of which, to bring it to our first topic of vice president, that would be when I was talking about alignment with Trump. If he asked me to be vice president, we'd have to have a sit-down conversation about, are we serious about shutting down these agencies? Because if so, I don't think anybody's going to do that and get that done better than me. If part of the goal is it's a little bit, not the direction we want to go, but we want to appoint some, figureheads on top of different agencies to go try to reform it, that's cool, but that's
not what you want to
There's
do.
other ways for me to drive change in this country, and I'll wish you well and be as supportive as I can, but that's not how I'm going to drive change. So when I was talking about even alignment early on, like, if we got serious and this was actually a role to get in and, for better or worse, left or right, gut the bureaucracy for the long run, and that's something that we're serious about getting done. I intend to do that as president. And I think that it does take a president to really do it. But would I do that as a vice president? Yes, I would.
Even the word bureaucracy, I think people know but can't define. And I'm not trying to be one of these managerial class idiots who's like, these people are too stupid. No, I don't think, I just think they hear the word like, yeah, that's an annoying thing. I think it's like when there's a lot of stuff in the middle mucking up and making it harder to get shit done. Or they're like, oh yeah, there's some bureaucratic bullshit, which is why my renovation is going so long or whatever, but they don't exactly know. And I think it's really the main ethos of what you've been saying is there is an interruption between what the people want and the people that should be executing
An interruption and accountability, absolutely.
And interruption is there.
Yep.
And sometimes that's an outside force, that's an FBI, that's a CIA. Sometimes it's who would be interrupting like, for example, using Nikki. Like, people are using these politicians and then forcing.
And there are things, the military-industrial complex, I think it's real.
Okay, so Raytheon, so.
And even the people at the Pentagon. Frankly, I mean, it's one revolving door class.
Oh, you're trying to get killed.
I hope not. I hope not. I hope not.
Everybody.
I hope not. But
You saw the video of the guy telling him, be careful, right?
Yeah, we don't want. I don't want to go there right now.
Go there.
It was very viral. That's the only reason I bring it up. It was very viral.
So I mean, it's on the internet. Let's keep talking ideas for a second.
While we have you
for a second. Yeah. So
And he doesn't mean today.
We've taken the steps to protect ourselves.
Good.
I think, you know, I think
You feel
God is the ultimate protection, and you know,
and you got a lot of them.
and we got to do our own job. That's funny.
just hit it one time.
That's funny.
No, but
Could have won Iowa if you did that a couple
you
times.
mentioned that you think people didn't trust you, that you would actually do it. Do you think?
Not even that I would. It wasn't even that. It was just at a more guttural level of like, I don't know this guy. Like I'm just processing a lot of like what I've heard is just like, I didn't know who he was. And
Like-
now he's telling me all these things that I like to hear, but he talks kind of fast and he went to these elite institutions and he's a little different in a lot of ways, and young and Hindu, and you got to like, I mean, there's a whole, it's not one of those things, but the whole package, it's just like, I don't.
Yeah, who the fuck are you?
Yeah, and in fact, I think that to come full circle, I mean, this is really in maybe the darker corners of the internet kind of thing, but I think there are people who then look and say, wait, is he really the plan? You know, right? Like, and it's sad that you have a Republican Party today that's so disconnected with its own base, because the Republican Party has been taken over by a managerial class of its own. The Ronna McDaniels, if you all don't know who that person is, all the better off for you, but she's the chairwoman of the RNC right now, who despises me and would rather me not have run for president because I'm calling out a lot of the corruption in the Republican Party. She had a 3x pay raise over the same period where the Republican Party lost 5 elections, and much of the funds were being spent on her hair salons or something like this.
Really?
But
how's the hair?
I'll plead the fifth on that. But it's not my place to say. But the point is, it's not the right expenditure. Right. And so anyway, the whole game is, okay, this guy is coming in, and it sounds so much like what I've been wanting. Yet we live in such a sad state of the Republican Party that if you actually get somebody who's saying what the many in the primary base of the Republican electorate and beyond want, it's like, wait a minute. That sounds so right that I'm suspicious of it.
But they did get that person, and he didn't do it. Trump ran on Jane in the Swamp. Got in office.
What I said is he rolled over that log, and we saw what crawled out, and give him credit for exposing it. And my whole thing is I'm bringing the pesticide.
But I would argue that there was a familiarity with Trump decades.
There was a long-standing familiarity.
Exactly. Whereas, like, and even like with Obama, I'm looking at like, because obviously, I'm sure people have likened you to Obama, right?
Yeah.
In certain ways.
Some people have.
Charismatic, good speaker, like
with very different views.
Young, big feet. So basically, you have this situation where people go, I trust Obama, and I'll tell you why. I think they saw him within government first, and he was barely in there. He gave that great speech at that, like, what is it?
The DNC.
It was the DNC.
2004 he did,
Yeah, he did his amazing speech, but the safety and security was he existed within politics, which even if people are disillusioned by it, they still trust. They're like, oh, he must have been vetted by something.
Yeah, something.
You go eat something at a grocery
Community
store.
organizer to senator, doesn't matter.
Exactly. You're like, okay, well, the water's probably good here because the FDA is going to make sure it's good. And you came completely casually outside with no awareness or
And I'm
very
not
minimal
complaining at
awareness.
all. I'm just saying, like, diagnosing, I think, where we were.
Speaking to it, and then immediately, if there's somebody who's compelling that we don't know about, very wealthy, like you have money, but we don't know you got money. I don't like that at all.
Yeah.
Like, where the fuck you get your money from? You know what I mean? Like, there's all these questions. Like, this guy's smart, he's sharp, he's got good teeth, he's got hundreds of millions of dollars, and I don't know about him?
And the funny thing is, so in the early stage of the race, like, I did something no politician, certainly nobody who's made serious wealth beforehand. I released 20 years of tax returns because, like, people are like, this is stupid, don't do that. They're all out there. They're published. People can just look at it. 20 years worth since I was 18 years old.
That was a shot.
Yeah.
And I've said, you know, I would, and I believe anybody who, and if I was elected president, I would divest all my holdings and everything else. So in some ways, we've aspired certainly to live by the principles that I want to see in somebody who we put in the office. But it's a sad enough state of our current state of affairs that itself, I think, was contributed to everything else being different, to a trust deficit. And I'm fine with that. And I mean, maybe I'll do this again in a few years. I don't know. Well, that's
I do.
you know, question.
Sorry, go.
I do know. But
You'll definitely go.
yeah,
You think
but-
so?
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll see where the country is the
that's
honest.
Good
True.
answer.
Yeah.
Trust deficit also potentially added to, and this is why I'm asking you, why run either party? Why not run independent?
If you want to win,
You can't win as independent.
RFK right now is polling
he's
crazy.
not going to win.
gonna
He's not going to go anywhere near winning. He might have an influence on the election. And it depends on what your goal is, right? If your goal is to change the conversation in the country,
Boom.
that's actually probably a better way to do it.
Independent,
There's a. I will say, if you want to change the conversation in the country, you are better off doing it as an independent.
I gotta follow up.
Than as a Republican or
You're
Democrat.
very quick to say you can't win running as an independent. Do you think you can beat Trump in a primary? Because nobody
I did,
touched
and
that.
I didn't succeed in it.
Yeah.
So there you go. I went from, most people started 0.0%, stayed 0.0%. I ended at 8% in the race, and we peaked at
Rounding
about 12.
up, but yeah.
What was it? 7.8.
You're rounding.
7.8. Yeah.
That's fine.
But had we gone through New Hampshire, man, I think
What
we would
cast
have
are
hit 8.
you in again?
Lower than him, I'm shocked.
That's an 8 right there,
I'm
bro.
lower than him. I'm hating.
If
No,
we hit-
I wanted
if we hit New
you to
Hampshire,
win,
it would've been
man.
8.
I think if you, at the very least, if you ran independent, you could have made some serious fucking waves. You could have made some serious fucking waves. I think you could have been.
We wouldn't have won the election, though.
Yeah, you
I
can't win
believed
as
that
a-
I was going to be. I ran with the conviction that I was going to be the next president.
All right, guys, let's take a break for a second because y'all stink. Let's just be honest. You smell bad. Smell your armpits right now. Take a moment. Take a whiff. Take a breath of that fresh from under. It's bad. And only a doctor could change it. Lucky for you, we got one. Dr. Squatch has got your back, balls and pits, it's got your whole body. Dr. Squatch is an awesome soap. It's 98% natural. Look at this, beautiful. That means it's got no harmful ingredients. Dr. Squatch soap will have you looking, but most importantly, smelling and feeling your best in and out of the shower. I personally love Birchwood Breeze. Right here, it's delicious. It's amazing. You smell incredible, okay? Your girl's gonna wanna suck it up nonstop, with all due respect. With all due respect, I mean that seriously. That's what your girl is gonna wanna do. I can't speak on behalf of anybody else, but your girl, she's gonna wanna suck it up. She's gonna wanna suck it right up. She's gonna smell that Birchwood Breeze, and she's gonna wanna suck it up. Goddamn. Anyway, right now, Dr. Squatch is offering our listeners huge savings. All new customers will get 3 free bars of soap, plus free shipping with any purchase of 3 bars. Just go to drsquatch.com/flagrant to receive this buy 3, get 3 offer. That is DRSQUATCH.com/flagrant. You buy 3 soaps, you get 3 free. It's time to get all the daily routine essentials you'll need to start feeling good and smelling like a man today. Now let's get back to the show. I've never sat down with someone who ran for president. How do you do that? How
I
do
had
you
to figure that
literally
out.
run for president?
I
Like,
had
who
to
do you
figure that
call?
out.
Like,
When we decided, that's what I did. So I called
who
some
is
people.
we? Like, give me the
Upward
whole...
and I, my wife and I.
So you and your wife have a conversation because
I mean,
she's
couple
going to
conversations over a month. Yeah, we
It's a
kind of started
mudslinging
thinking about
contest
that.
too.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna get run through the mud.
Yep.
Like literally, your wife, your family, they're gonna go after everybody. So you gotta ask, I'm sure, like for their blessing, bare minimum.
Yes. That was the one. My kids are too young to be able to process it. But
You guys are
the one
successful.
person
You
that has a
don't need
veto
any
is
of
my wife.
And she was like, I'm down
She was initially like, "Are we sure we can't do this later in life?"
because the kids are young, or
Yeah,
because
the kids are young. And also we've just kind of hit a place. We had just kind of hit a place where, I mean, I was building a company for a long time. We'd finally, I mean, that's its own slog. She had been through residency. She was a surgical resident. Actually, she did her training in New York, all that stuff.
everything.
Finished her fellowship, and she's got a great academic post. We had just had our second son. We were at the place where it's like, okay, like this feels like a destination we've been working to for a long time.
And we are gonna just
And now we're
jam
just gonna mix it up. Yeah, exactly. And are we gonna like? I think our first reaction was like, she's biased. She's married to me, but I believe you would be a good leader for this country.
Okay, so
and
you
I
get the
understand.
approval.
Can we do this later? And then we talked through it, and I think we both convinced ourselves into why it had to be now with the sense of urgency.
When do you tell her that you're going to spend your own money? Because
She didn't care about that. She doesn't care about that. She does not care. she's not. She's not.
What kind of wife is this?
She really.
How much fucking money you got?
She really doesn't. She really doesn't.
950 mil.
Yeah.
What the
950 mil. You know what I mean?
Oh, are you a Bill? Do you got the B?
On a given day, depends on the day.
Really?
Depends what the market's doing on a given
That's
day.
not a fire answer, dude.
Depends on-
Wikipedia was hating
it's like
on
a,
it.
it's like a,
Depends on
it's like
the
a
day, it's such a
borderline
flame.
kind of
Wikipedia
situation.
was
Bro.
like 987 or
I was
something.
trying to pull a knockoff.
I think it's probably
1,000
an
there,
advantage
depending
to
on
be
the day.
flying like right under the radar. We've given away enough.
Okay,
money.
so you got the B.
Yeah.
You've built the businesses. There's nothing left to
It's like a
accomplish
lowercase
over
B.
there. You got
It's
the
not like
lowercase.
not like one of the 50
Yeah, you
billion
broke
people.
boy.
Yeah. It's a very
hold on,
lowercase
hold
B.
on.
Yeah.
So you've done everything you need to do in the business sector. Okay, is there? I'm sure you have ambition to make sure the country reaches its full potential or restore it to its full potential. Just as an American, you have pride. I'm sure you have that. I'm not trying to take anything away from that. Is there also a part of you that just as a man is like, I want a passion. I want something to do. Like, what makes somebody who has all that money?
Yeah. Put
yourself through that.
It's always
It's fucking hard. People try
My
to-
wife could probably give you a better answer about me than I give you about me, but I think that there's a book by Viktor Frankl. I don't know if you've read. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. I read it in high school. You familiar with it? I went to St. Xavier in Cincinnati, and it was sort of spiritual book. And anyway, I think all of us have an innate hunger for purpose, right? To feel like what we're doing here in the short time that we're given is meaningful.
Yeah.
And I think that each of us also has our own unique God-given gifts.
Yeah.
And I think the true source of satisfaction is matching, at least for me, and my sense is it's probably true for most people, is matching what your unique God-given gifts are to your sense of purpose
in the world. Yeah.
And if you can match those two things,
It's an exciting thing.
that's much more, that is sort of true self-actualization.
Yeah.
That is true liberation more than whether it's a bigger case B or a lowercase b. And so for me, that match felt like it was in leading this country. And weird as it sounded, and most people say it's terrible, I was pretty convinced we were going to succeed at this.
I mean, I hope.
Like when we're setting out. But even at like 0.0, nobody, I thought it's not like we're going to go and see where this goes. I thought that this is going to end with, I think I have the right vision. I have deep conviction in it. I believe that most people in this country, if they don't see it today, can be made to see that. And ended up getting 8%, rounded up. And so there were some structural reasons for that this time around. But I think that nonetheless, that was what motivated me. You're asking another question about the politics or the analysis of it, but what compelled me,
personally,
that's what I felt is the unique
Was it exciting?
confluence. Yes.
Did you love every single day?
I loved most days. Not every single day.
Right.
But I loved most days.
What were unexpected
yeah, like-
challenges of the campaign that you didn't see?
Yeah, what was the shit?
I mean, it's going to sound so stupid when I say it because it's like,
that'd
should have been obvious.
There's a first time for everything.
No,
So
it is like, I mean, the influence of mega money on politics.
Break it down when you first felt it.
When I understood the dynamic of dealing with mega donors, actually, it's sort of disgusting, actually. So I spent $30 million. It's a lot of our
You spent
hard-earned
$30
money.
million
30,
of your dollars.
Close to 30, yeah.
Rounding
yeah, right about.
Oh,
right
he
at
could
30.
do that. His life
30,
would
yeah.
let him do
Okay,
that.
I just
That's
wanna write
nothing
that
to
down.
him.
Might have been
That's
like
us buying a
29.5
watch.
or something, but something like that.
30 million.
And
To lose.
yes,
The fuck, man?
I know, man. You're really
Could've
twisting
gave
the
me
knife here.
15, bro. What the hell with that?
Twisting the knife.
No, I'm just joking.
But
Take the delta between your net worth and our net worth.
but I I mean, at a certain point, like,
Can you
what's,
write that
what's
off?
the point?
There's gotta be
No,
something
no
like-
write-off. No write-off.
So you spend that 30.
Yeah, it's just out the door, not coming
and
back.
never coming back at all.
Yeah.
And
But
your wife, how
she
did
does
you
not
train
care
her
about-
to be like this?
She just doesn't. She's just not into. She's not that into like stuff. Actually,
She's also a doctor on
she's
her
not
own,
into
so
She's a
stuff.
surgeon.
Yeah,
I think
but
she's good.
The thing is,
case, I'm
she's.
fine.
I mean, the thing is, actually, many of the procedures she does, we have
I
such a
bought Mark
broken
dinner
healthcare
once.
system.
My wife was like, "Why?" 30. If I spent $30 million,
I ordered double though. I was bulking. I was
damn.
You got a tomahawk steak.
Okay, go.
So anyway, I think that, yeah, I mean, we don't, that's our sense of, that for me was a sense of purpose,
Yep.
is what I would say. It's like, I believe God's given me unique gifts
Yep.
in this category to use them. I believe that there's a purpose that needs to be fulfilled, and I'm here to fulfill. And that's what gave me my sense of deep satisfaction about this. And she was super supportive of it, largely because she's doing the same thing. Like, I think, actually, the last time we had a conversation like that was in reverse, believe it or not, was when, so our first son, Karthik, was born in, I talked about this in, actually, you might not have gotten to that part yet.
Did she
You're
go
not in the
back
woke
to
age.
school after their kid?
She doesn't go back to school. She's in residency. So she's finishing her residency
Yeah, I didn't
here
get to this.
at Cornell. It's in the last chapter, I forgot. In Cornell, Columbia here. She's an ear, nose, throat surgeon, but she specializes in throat surgery.
Okay.
So she's an airway surgeon. And he's born in February of 2020, which is an interesting time to be born in New York City. He's born on February 23rd, 2020. And that was like literally the week after that is when that first wave
Spike.
hit New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people went COVID policy crazy in this country in the next couple of years. But that first wave in New York City, I don't know if you guys were here then.
Oh, yeah, it was panic.
That was not a joke.
Yeah,
yeah. And the hospitals were super overfilled. So she had just had an emergency C-section at Columbia on February 23rd, 2020. And yet she's an airway surgeon. Okay?
Fuck.
And so they're short-staffed at the hospital. They've got patients piling up. Every operating room is converted into an ICU. And there's literally a lot of older people included, like, gonna die unless there's people who are able to help them with the skill set she's been given. And she's very good at what she does. And so in some sense of the union of our God-given skills and our sense of purpose, for her, that was March of 2020. So a little over 3 weeks in, after emergency C-section, she could take 6 months off if she wants to for maternity leave, or at least 6 weeks. She goes back. So she's in the operating room less than 4 weeks after giving emergency C-section. And back then, nobody
good stuff.
amazing.
nobody
This is good
knew
stuff.
Yeah.
nobody knew what this was back then.
Have you told people this?
How
yet?
you
Not a
not
lot
tell
of
the
people.
story
This
till
is
you
good
lost, yo?
stuff.
Come
Not a
on.
lot of people,
Yeah,
but
this is, we're too late in to hear this.
Yeah.
This is good stuff. Move over, Michelle Obama.
Yeah.
This is.
So I'm a biotech CEO. I'm CEO of Roivant here.
We don't care.
Yeah,
we just-
we're
for your wife.
She's
I'm like, don't
saying
forget
it
about me,
live.
guys. So I brought that up because I had been traveling the whole prior year, and so she had to have when I talked about the sit-down conversation I had with her, she had the sit-down conversation with me. It's like, listen, I have to go do this.
That's fucking amazing.
We have a son. He's 3 weeks old. We don't know what's going to happen if I'm doing open airway surgery, and we don't know what this virus is. I need you. It wasn't really a question. It was sort of like, I need you.
gotta do it.
I need you to step up and do this.
Wow.
So I took our little man. We already knew we were going to settle back in Ohio. We had moved to Ohio late the year before. She was just finishing up her residency here and happened to give birth here because that's where the doctor was. So I took him, and I was single father for what was going to be a few weeks, but then she ended up predictably whatever, she got sick. Nobody knew what it was. It wasn't a big deal. Her father also got sick. He was also a surgeon and was taking care of patients. He ended up in the ICU. She's there with a couple weeks, and she continues to do airway surgery, open airway surgery for people who are sick. Ended up being about 2 months where I'm playing solo single father of what was our 1 month to 3 month old son during those period of time. And I think it still hurts Apurva today that she missed those 2 months.
I mean, it's
She's not
such
going
an
to get it
amazing
back.
example for your son. Like, it's
When he
incredible.
grows up, he'll grow to appreciate it. She was shipping him breast milk, during that period. Yeah, yeah,
Goodness.
absolutely. But for us, that was our conviction that she has a skill set. God put her here to do it. She did her job and did her duty. And so for me, when we, 2.5 or 3 years later, I had a similar. It felt like the same conversation in
Go
reverse.
The nation is sick.
And she didn't take a beat other than to say, "Are you sure we can't do this later?" We talked through that, and she says, "Great,
Wow.
let's go."
Question, how does that whole thing influence the way you view COVID policies, how we handled everything? How did that experience shape your views?
There's some interesting things that happened. I mean, at that time, I remember one of the most remarkable things was they were sending out mass emails to the people who were in the medical profession, including, in her workplace and everything else, saying, "Don't wear masks. They're scaring people and they're and whatever," only for a few months later to then reverse and say there's a policy. So it was just people saying things with a level of certainty that they just didn't have. So what in that early stage of that pandemic do we know? We didn't know much.
We knew nothing.
And so we had to make decisions in the face of uncertainty.
Yeah.
We took the facts we had. It looked, even in that early phase, like even if Apoorva did get this, it looked like she was going to be fine.
Right.
And it was the right thing for her to do. We didn't know how it would affect infants. We separated so that we were able to keep the infant away. But my takeaway was, at least if we as a government were able to, I'm not saying, I don't mean to sound self-important in this way, but more as a lesson learned, in the way that maybe we handled it as a family. If you have government leaders that say, and are just honest about the fact, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, here's the best decision we're making in the face of information that's available, and here's why, I think we would have been a lot better off rather than the fake hubris of saying that we pretend to know more than we do.
Here's how we keep you safe.
Yes.
Where
even
does
though
that
we don't
hubris
know.
come from?
Yeah.
Is it like?
I think it comes from a belief that that's what the people need to see.
Yeah.
It's the same managerial.
it's the
class.
weakness. That's kind of what I'm saying.
It's kind of some of the
Altruistic
same
intentions.
mentalities. People need to see fortitude, strength.
And is the justification to
decisiveness.
avoid the chaos that would ensue if people felt that anxiety of uncertainty?
People are scared.
I think it's a fear of chaos. I think it's a fear of chaos.
They justify it by going, we don't want people to feel anxious. We don't want them to feel like they're. We want them to believe we know what's going on, because then they can be calm while we figure this out.
and then they will be more likely to listen to what we need them to do when we tell them.
And there's
to do
a better
And I think it's
version
actually the
of it.
opposite. I think they misread some of human nature.
Oh, 'cause once I
I
don't
think
trust
actually,
you-
if you just tell somebody,
Yeah.
just tell the truth, right?
Yeah.
Here's the truth.
Here's
what we know. Here's what we don't know. But
There's
here's
a-
just the truth, and we're not
there's a-
hiding it from you.
Yeah, but there's a delicate way that you can deliver that truth that isn't a lie, but also doesn't go, yo, we don't know what the fuck's going on. There is a version of it which is, we still need time to accurately decide what is the best way to handle
And even if
this.
it's not relevant on the piece of how you address it, this is what actually drove the lies about the origination in China, worries about racism in the United States or whatever, because there was, anti-Asian attacks in the U.S. I think just the right answer is, we don't know for sure, but it sure looks like it came from a lab in China where we were funding research that we intended to use to prevent a pandemic, but things might have gone a little wrong, and we created one.
Yeah.
And
We
so,
as in America, you think America created it?
I think we
Or we
paid for
funded
it.
the
We funded its
research
creation.
fund.
Yeah, I think there's
but
very
they
little doubt
fucked
about
up
that.
the stitching, and
Yeah, I mean,
Someone didn't shut the door.
yeah. I mean, I think there's still unanswered questions.
Yeah.
I think there's still unanswered questions about
these
what
guys don't
actually
even make
went
good
down
Jordan.
there. But
Right.
that's. I think we should have I think we deserve the answers to that question, and should hold the bad actors accountable, or else we can expect even worse in the future. Again, without accountability, you're doomed to repeat the same mistakes at a larger scale in the future. That's what I believe. But anyway, I think that would be one of my lessons: is honesty. Free speech matters most, not in ordinary times, but in supposedly emergency times. If you had been allowed to debate the lockdowns, I don't think we would have locked down the schools. I don't think we would have locked down the cities for nearly as long as we did. If you'd been allowed to debate the merits of the vaccine, I don't think we would have had vaccine mandates in this country.
Yeah.
I think that autonomy is paramount in the end. I think you should be able to take something even if the FDA hasn't approved it. I think you shouldn't have to take something just because the FDA has approved it. But I think there's a lot of learnings. But I think that the irony, the ultimate tragedy in this managerial conceit, this hubris, is that it'd be one thing if you actually could have pulled it off, that you actually did earn the trust, even if it was based on a lie. But the irony is, you're in the worst of all worlds, where you actually have bred greater mistrust
Yeah.
through the act of lying itself. So
Yeah.
it loses not just on philosophical terms, which is what moves me, but even on the terms of its own effectiveness, actually. Right? And so I think that that's something that, for me, is one of the great lessons. The reason people don't trust the government is actually because the government doesn't trust the people. And like in any relationship, trust is a two-way relationship, right? In a marriage, in a friendship, in a work relation, a boss, in a CEO-employee relationship, trust is a two-way relationship. And I think the government is in a relationship with its people. We as citizens are in a relationship with one another. And I think that trust is a two-way relationship that has been today squandered in both directions. And I think that if we think about, ways to heal this country, two steps would, I think, go a long way towards uniting and healing this country. Is if somebody got in the government, say a U.S. president, it's what I intended to do if we got in there. Apparently that's not meant to be this time. But what I hoped to do is to just rip the cord off, whatever, take the Band-Aid off on a lot of the areas where, at least in the last 20 years, you can just start with the last 5 years. 20 years might be too far back. Last 5 years, where there's been understandable public suspicion of what we've been told, and just to say, hey, here's what we know. I mean, pick your favorite topic. The fringy ones, UAPs, whatever it is. Here's what we know. And here's what we don't.
Full disclosure.
And here's where we lied to you. Like, be acknowledged. Here's where we lied. And I say we because even if it wasn't me, if you're the president, you own what came before you. You represent that. Here's where we lied to you. Here's why we lied to you. I think the why is important too. Here's why we lied to you. And here's how we're going to ensure that never happens again. And if somebody in the government, ideally the president, steps up and does that, that's step one. Step two is somebody in the media. It doesn't have to be everybody. Somebody. Could be CNN, could be MSNBC, could be Fox, could be, pick your favorite one. But somebody steps up and says, okay, here's where we were wrong. You pick your favorite one, Hunter Biden laptop, COVID origin, Nashville transgender shooter manifesto, January 6th. You could go straight down the list, whatever it is. Here's where we lied to you. Here's why we lied to you. Here's where we were wrong, and here's the changes we're making to ensure that doesn't happen again, and to acknowledge that whatever the next thing is, you're probably not going to trust me because you don't have a reason to. But give us a little bit of time, and I think we're going to earn your trust back. And look their audience in the eye and tell them that. Those two things happen, one from the White House Rose Garden and one from any mainstream once trusted anchor looking their audience in the eye and saying it. Those two things happen. We are well on our way to healing and reuniting this country, actually. It's not that hard, actually. It's not that hard.
Real quick, there's I feel like there's an extreme dip in American pride.
Oh, yeah.
And after talking to you, it makes sense because how can you be proud of a government that does not represent you and a country run by people
doesn't trust you
that do not trust you, right? So the relationship.
And how can you trust somebody who doesn't trust you?
Of course not. So one of the questions I had for you, I was like, how do we reinstill the American pride? And there's a buddy of mine named Ben Uyeda, is a really smart guy. He's like, I'm proud to be American. I was like, why? And he's like, this is the best version of myself. That's what America has given to me. The opportunity to be the greatest version of myself. I don't think there's another country in the world where I could be the best version of myself. Now, this is a country that put his grandparents, or was it great-grandparents, in the internment camps, right? So, but he still is like the ideals of this country.
Yes.
Sometimes we get off.
Yep.
Sometimes we wiggle, and I think this is kind of what you've been speaking to.
Yep.
But the ideals are there, and I think that that's something that we can all have pride in.
Yes.
When we get those right, we are the best version of ourselves.
Yes, we are.
No matter who the fuck we are. I saw my mom get her citizenship, and it was like really touching. I got like emotional at it. I saw all these people.
It is an emotional experience.
I wish people could go see the excitement that is there when these people are realizing this dream, because it is a fucking dream. And yeah, maybe they're looking at America in the best possible way. Maybe looking at those ideals, maybe looking at what that Constitution represents. But if this managerial class, who is not necessarily doing it with nefarious intent, and that's a really important thing.
It's benevolent conceit.
There it is. So if they are either removed or moved out of the way, or there is a way to execute it where they have utility but not disruption. I think that could.
So I'm pretty sparse and libertarian in my tendency to believe that the way to do this is just through publicly accountable elected officials, actually. And we'll get a better class of public elected official once that actually becomes clear to everybody how important that is. Versus if that's unimportant, then you get the C team that you're getting right now.
Yeah.
But that's exactly right. This is a step to uniting this country. It's also part of, even when you think about the elections meaning something, and this is the more philosophical underpinning of why I favor. So I favor this because I think it quells any of the concern about election integrity. But there's a deeper element to this too, of our elections meaning something. That civic ritual that your mother and you as a family sounds like went through. That's why I favor single day voting on election day. Make it a national holiday. And do it with the way the Iowa caucus is done, with paper ballots and government-issued ID. There's the election integrity concerns. I favor making English the sole language that appears on a ballot. Many people find that controversial. But we are a nation founded on ideals, but who are we if we can't even communicate those ideals with one another? Right? I think that one of the things that's dividing this country to a breaking point is just we're innate as human beings. We distrust one another when people are speaking a language you don't understand. They can speak that language, but if you don't share that language in common, at least on the day that you're expressing the civic ritual, and by the way, all of this goes to the concerns about election integrity anyway, and one of the things I've said in leading the Republican Party is, if we get single day voting on election day as a national holiday, with paper ballots, government ID, and English as the sole language on a ballot, I will pledge, we have to be, we're just done complaining about election integrity or results or whatever. And we move the country forward, but we do it with the civic ritual that gives us a sense of appreciation of that set of ideals that the country was founded on. Are we perfect? No, we're not. Have we ever been perfect? No, we're not.
And we're going to keep fucking up.
Yes, because we are
But we're
men,
going to try.
not gods.
Yes.
Right? We're a nation.
God.
Well, you're here in the plural. So we are men, not God. And we are still a nation founded on ideals.
Yeah.
And so those two things, by definition, it's like a math equation. It's like an axiomatic. You have the axioms and the corollary. Those two things are the axioms, that we are fallen human beings, not God, and that we are still founded on a set of ideals that we aspire to.
Yeah.
Then the necessary logical consequence of that is that we will always fall short of our ideals.
But let me aspire.
But aspire to.
If you take away
Yes.
my ability to aspire
Then-
by having this
then we're done.
managerial class
Then we're
that's going to
done.
dictate exactly what I can do.
Exactly.
Now you're taking away my
Let
my
me
pride.
strive and fail
Yeah.
sooner than you have me optically succeed.
Yeah.
What would
That's
you-
exactly
It
right.
is optic success.
It's the illusion.
Because that's how they get the pat on the back.
Yes,
Look
yes.
what these people did. I told you I was right. Look how good I am at managing them.
I appreciate you having what seems like, to me, reflecting a deep understanding of my worldview in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
Because actually this, I think
I
what
think
you
it's
just
important
said.
to be explained
Yeah,
in this way.
yeah.
And that's why, like, deep state is just like such a buzzword that people hear, and they have all these ideas wrapped around it that might not actually be what you're saying, even if they mean the same thing. I think when people think of deep state, they're like, Nancy Pelosi's in a room and she's saying, hey, FBI, go do this and let's bomb that
And
shit.
it's
And that's the deep
nefarious
state.
intentions.
Exactly. Whereas
As
managerial
opposed
class,
to just
yeah.
the slow motion reality is far more boring in its nature,
Dude,
actually.
the reality
Yeah.
of what we perceive as evil intent is always far more boring. Always.
If I look at you as just a CEO who would be elected president and remove the bureaucracy, that's a very different thing than a guy who's going to tackle the deep state. That sounds so abstract. If I look at you as like, oh, this is a CEO who built, he's a billionaire, lowercase b, uppercase b don't matter, off of this thing, and he's going to help the United States government run more efficiently and in our best interests. That's fucking.
But what was up with the mega donors you were saying?
I was just-
I was just going to say
Don't
that.
go
Yeah,
off on
we I mean, so there, it's just sort of this dynamic where there's like a courtship and an expectation that you supplicate yourself that I was just very bad at because I couldn't put my heart into it at any point in time. And so, if there's a next time, and I didn't really do much of it this time, and that's
Give
why.
an example of it?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think like the
name would be great.
the handwritten notes, the ability, the idea that people believe that you got to fly to where they are to see them to some donor retreat. They summoned every candidate. Actually, by the end of it, they didn't summon me, but they summoned the DeSantis and Haley and Scott campaigns to figure out how there was going to be a discussion about who was actually going to take on Trump. It's sort of
Who are they? Who are
Oh,
they?
just
Just like the Koch brothers?
a lot of wealthy people in the Republican, frankly, in both parties.
Peter Thiel.
No, he didn't play this time.
But he's always involved, right?
I think this time he wasn't.
I like that
this time
verbiage. He didn't
wasn't.
play this time.
Yeah.
It is a game.
Yeah.
But it's a game, man.
So who's one of the people that was
I
playing?
mean,
fascinated with Peter Thiel, man.
you could look at actually one of the most interesting twists right now. One of the most interesting twists is You know who some of the biggest donors, because it shows you how bipartisan this is. You know, the biggest donors to Nikki Haley include the very people who have been actually funding to keep Donald Trump off the ballot from a left-wing perspective. So like Reid Hoffman is one such person. And the thing, he's the founder of LinkedIn, which, by the way, censored me early in this campaign for making factual statements about climate change. And then they said it violated their policies on hate speech, misinformation, and violence when we challenged them on what was inaccurate about it. After I shared it with, we just shared our email exchanges with the New York Post, which printed it. Microsoft then comes out and says, "Oh no, your account was locked in error," which is funny. It makes it sound like a technical glitch. That's just a funny side story. But
this is the type of stuff that happens behind the scenes.
Absolutely,
while you're running.
absolutely.
This guy's funding Nikki Haley in an attempt to do what exactly?
Just to have her beat Donald Trump in the primary.
I think the idea would be she's much more beatable in a general election.
No, I don't think that's the idea at all, actually. I think the idea is she's actually going to be more effective than Biden at advancing certain of the agendas, actually.
But does he support?
And the Democratic brand is kind of tarnished right now. And if they get Biden, he's started to lose his use as the leader of their pawn on the chessboard, but then they got this thing called a Kamala Harris problem.
Yes.
And so one better way to do that is, the Democratic Party's brand is a little tarnished. We get to have the illusion of nonpartisanship.
Put in
Somebody else we can control, and just all Nikki needs is to be cut in on the rake a little bit, right? I mean, she left the government. She was in debt, and she quickly, $8 million off of paid speeches, military contracting firms.
Tell me how these politicians become millionaires.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, mostly getting paid. We make it sound really nefarious under the table, but it's basically under the table.
So
right?
there are under the table deals made. It's not,
but they're actually hiding. Many of them are just hiding in plain sight. So it's my belief that if you have done favors for Boeing to the tune of $900 million or nine-figure sums of money, hundreds of millions of dollars in the state of South Carolina, showering on Boeing, that it would be inappropriate and undesirable for you to take as one of your first paid seats after you leave government to sit on Boeing's board, where they have a nice warm seat waiting for you. That's exactly what Nikki Haley does. Or I think it would be inappropriate if you're representing the U.S. at the United Nations and you abruptly step off as your family is wallowing in debt, for you to be able to start a military contracting firm that exploits your connections at the UN to advocate for policies that allow a military contracting firm to make more money, which is indeed those that are hawkish or pro-war policies. That's exactly what she does. Or give paid speeches to foreign actors without disclosing what those speeches are. But it's not just Nikki Haley. I mean, I think if you're the vice president of the United States, I don't think your son should be sitting on the board of a Ukrainian company collecting $5 million when he doesn't have the first qualification to do it.
Yeah.
Especially if you then become the president and fork over $200 billion of money to Ukraine. If you're Elizabeth Warren, nobody has any idea. Everybody knows what her salary is.
Yeah.
Her and her husband's included. And, a few $100,000 a year, they got expenses. And suddenly her net worth is disclosed to be $68 million.
Like,
that
isn't
math
that
doesn't add up.
interesting?
That math does not add up. And it's just across the board in both parties.
Yep.
This is how it works.
Yep.
And so my own view is if you're in Congress, you shouldn't be allowed to trade individual stocks. Neither should any of the bureaucrats.
Or your husband.
Yeah,
or any,
in your orbit. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you should be allowed to lobby the government for at least 10 years. I mean, maybe if you really aspired to a life career as a lobbyist, at least wait 10 years.
And
until after
explain
you left the government.
explain how that happens. So basically, they leave government and then they get paid by these lobbyist firms.
By industry to represent them to go after their own, to open the doors to their own prior colleagues.
Right.
I don't think that if you've done special favors for a company, like showering hundreds of millions of dollars on them, you should be able to join the board of that company.
Yeah.
Which, again, would create maybe the illusion that you knew that they were going to do that for you at the time you were showering $100 million.
What about the speeches?
Or if you're the regulator, if you're at the FDA, I don't think you should be able to join the board of a pharmaceutical company afterwards. I mean, this is rampant. It happens all the time.
That makes sense. But I feel like one version, because I was looking into this a little bit, I kind of want to do a piece on this, but the way that a lot of them make their money after they're in government is through these speeches.
So do you think somebody really wanted to pay seven figures to hear
listen
Nikki
to
Haley speak?
Forget Nikki Haley. Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
This is one of the most
Seven
boring
figures, yeah.
individuals. You're talking about $500,000.
No. In some cases, we're talking
talk?
seven figure. At least in Nikki, one of these cases, seven figures.
But we know the
for one
entire
speech.
country doesn't like hearing her talk.
Oh yeah.
Right?
So maybe it's not for the talk, right? That's the whole point.
That's
right. That's the whole point.
And is that their way of scratching the backs?
Of course it is. It's one of the tools. It's not the only tool.
And it's
but
not
it's one of the
explicitly
tools.
said, but it's basically like, okay, you do this for us, and then when you're done running,
Absolutely.
or when you're out of office, we have 7 speeches lined up.
Yeah.
Give your same stupid speech. Nobody's
again,
going to fucking
And again,
listen.
it's like a game theoretic thing where I don't think in most cases
They
that's
don't even need to
verbalized.
say it.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
you understand that's how the game is played.
Yeah.
And the beat goes on.
Okay,
That's
what
it.
about Kushner getting that $2 billion deal from MBS?
What deal is that in terms of investing in a fund? Now he has a track record as an investor. I don't know what went down.
But
in there.
apparently the Saudi fund.
People have criticized
vetted it.
Mnuchin. People have I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah.
My view is just across the board.
Yeah.
Across the board.
Yeah.
Certainly for people in Congress or the U.S. Senate.
Yeah.
Let's just start with that, because these are the people who should be accountable to the people
I mean,
at large
it seems like an absolute no-brainer. Now, here's the concern. This is an ethical dilemma, of course, because what I'm going to suggest, you could argue, is unethical. But if you cannot get rich in politics, will the smart people not want to enter politics?
So here's what I would say is, I think the term limits are good. I think you should get in there and get out.
Which is what it used to be. That's the idea.
I want 8 years. So if I can't work for the people for more than 8 years as their president, I don't want the people reporting into me to generally work for more than 8 years either. Get in, get out. 3 terms is the limit for Congress. 2 terms is the limit for the Senate. And I think that I would sooner have a discussion about increasing the salary. I don't think somebody should be forced to be poor. Or even have the limit where they send their kids to school.
Yeah.
But I would rather than just tell us what it is in the open, rather than having to do the underhand deal with, well, they didn't pay me enough anyway, I'm just going to do it this way. And so I think that that's a reasonable thing to do. Now, term limits, most of these people wouldn't vote for term limits. Here's my solution on that: is it's shameful, but it would work. It would work in a heartbeat. If I was president, we would have gotten this done. Is grandfather in the people. Let me get the final deal. Look, we got it all lined up. You don't want to vote for it. We'll grandfather you in.
Meaning you're
not subject to term limits.
Exactly.
But the guy who comes after you next
and they would do it in a heartbeat.
They would do it in a heartbeat.
Fuck about the new people.
And it's a wildly popular policy, right? And the same thing with the insider trading bans. Most congressmen hate it when I talk about banning trading of individual stocks.
Not for you, Pelosi.
You have to say that, otherwise they would never pass it. So we got the deal lined up, and we'll just say out of an
virtue signal.
Yeah, but you can't make it nakedly self-interest. So you would say out of respect for the continuation of prior norms, this will begin on a date certain in the year 2030 or whatever, right? But that's kind of how it would have to go, actually.
Right.
And so and they would do it because it's a wildly popular policy.
Let's assume all these things happen and it works. Who plots the long-term course of America if people are getting elected or reelected every 2, 6, 4 years?
Yeah.
The long-term course, like who is making deals that are going to impact our great-grandchildren's futures? Because that's an important thing.
I think that with this setup and the term limits, et cetera,
managerial class for that?
This is the question, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's the best argument for the thing that I'm against.
That's
but
what
I'm still
asking.
against it.
Yeah, okay.
Because I think that you will then select for the kind of leader that is viewing it as a temporary form of public service. And the job of that leader is to think on the timescales of history rather than the timescales of tomorrow, if they're doing their job right. And it puts accountability back on the people to elect such a person. Back to what Thomas Jefferson had said, the people elect the government that they deserve.
Okay, so break this down to me really quick. You think that because the country is now truly in the hands of the government that are selected and not in this managerial class, that all of a sudden their viewpoints for the country will then transform?
It should. The people should elect such people, and if not, we got what we deserved. Just like in your personal financial life.
And then we're okay with that. We have to live with that.
We have to live with that. And that's what I said, for better or worse, that's what 1776 was fought for.
Now, as much as I might agree with this, do you think that Americans like the cozy security of a managerial class maintaining the price of oil under $4 a gallon? And
right now, maybe we are. Well,
do they want that risk in their life?
So here's the thing we live in right now is you're offering the best statement of that other side's view. Right now, we live in the worst of all worlds.
Yeah.
Where actually people are seeing how that has ruined their own lives.
Managerial class sucks.
Yeah,
and they've
left exactly.
Yeah.
So the hard case presents itself when those come into conflict, which is the philosophical case. But that's not where we are right now.
Yeah.
So I think that's what now makes it for the right moment to tear the thing down anyway. Mm-hmm. But I do think that in a psychological sense, we have become a nation of sheep. Okay, and I think a nation of sheep is what breeds this managerial class of wolves, actually. And so I think you get what you deserve anyway. It's a two-way, just as trust is a two-way relationship, we don't have trust one direction or the other. Once you do adopt this nation of sheep, waking up, two-legged higher mammals, celebrating our diversity, doing what our iPhones tell us to do on a given day, making our way across an American terrain. Yeah, you kind of get the government that feeds you and creates more of that in return. And it's up to us to declare independence. And so when I say things like the other night, as I said, we live in a 1776 moment, that's what I mean. It's our time to declare independence, not just from the managerial class, but even from within that inner prison within each of us too, that has confined us by the tools of the managerial class, including but not limited to the algorithmification of our modern life. That's a whole separate discussion for another day. But I think that we live in a moment where it's time for a modern declaration of independence of the forces that have shackled us on the exterior and the interior. And it's not a coincidence that those two things happen at the same time. They actually go together. And so I think each of us, I mean, we talked about this at a governmental level, but I think each of us has an inner sheep and an inner lion. And I think right now the inner sheep is winning the day, mostly, at least across our general population level. And it's partly because we've been lulled into that by having the comfort of the fact that we're not accountable for our decisions, but somebody else is. And so might as well give in to my sheep-like tendencies rather than my lion-like tendencies.
I mean, it's good to phrase it like that because we all obviously want to be a lion, but I think at the end of the day, people really, truly do want security, and they're willing to sacrifice some freedom for security. Now, I'm not saying that that's...
And right now, we're getting neither.
But I think that's the most important thing. It's
right now, practically speaking,
you sacrifice your security for this idea of freedom, but you've actually had your freedom further restricted because now you're not represented in any way at all.
Right.
So now you have nothing. So nothing. We still live in fucking America, greatest country in the world. But I hear what you're saying.
The trajectory we're on is a
philosophically.
trajectory to nothing. Yeah,
right.
Is what I do believe.
So basically, it's like it was a fool's bet. Someone told you, "Hey, give me a little bit of that freedom, or give me a little bit of your representation. I'm gonna give you all security," and then you didn't get it.
Yep.
So you were lied to.
Yes. Which is what makes it an easy moment to drive the kind of change that I am right now, where the philosophical and the practical go hand in glove together. It's not a trade-off anymore.
If
it's
this
actually
change
go together.
doesn't happen, what do you think happens to America? If we continue on the trajectory we're on, what do you say happens in 20, 30, 50 years?
I think we go the direction that most nations through human history have, which is to be another ordinary nation in human history where the people couldn't be trusted, and we sort of elegant decay into mediocrity, much like what we saw in Western Europe over the course of the last couple centuries since the U.S. was formed, probably in a tighter time frame.
We need to build some more fountains. Though,
I think our own culture of excellence has gone to China, and I think they're in autocratic form will have a newly
Aren't they the
dominant
epitome of the managerial class?
Well, they are, but they're the best version of it.
Because they're a benevolent managerial
No,
class?
just because it's sort of the nature of the founding of the modern state. Whereas in some ways, we're a nation. We're like betraying our true essence, right? And so we're not even like good at doing this managerial class thing, right?
But
so I think that's actually what's going on. Is like we're this bastardized, mutated form of like not even the thing that we are at our core. So you could look at this from Mars and say that is the American model better as the Chinese model? And it's like we're not up.
Didn't we
I have a
inspire
view,
their
but some Martian might say that one is, that these are two different models.
Yeah.
But at least one model is being itself. So, right, the communist Chinese government was the one that Mao Zedong set into motion.
Right.
But we're not the one that George Washington set into motion.
Right.
And so it's in some ways the worst of all worlds. Is it's a betrayal of what the thing actually was.
Yeah, because that Martian can't actually look at what we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And make that judgment. But couldn't you say that like the Chinese government or a lot of these governments, even like Russia, you could look at Turkey, aren't they a reflection of American influence in a way?
Some of them are.
Where it's like, so we basically tell the world, yo, let your people vote. And then we get in there like, all right, well, we'll influence this election. We got you. So we're not giving away potential true democracy.
Yeah.
So they need
that gets into more practical.
I'm not being nuanced with my geopolitical take here, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that in order to maintain power or that managerial class or whatever it is, so that they can actually compete with America, they need to have one group, or they believe they need to have one group in charge. It's the ultimate, I do not trust the people in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
That being said, I don't know. I like betting on us. I like betting on us.
And I'm betting on us with all I have in my life, my money and my effort and my, and our That's what we're doing.
Also,
that
to
brings me
his
to
point.
I'm trying to make the ultimate bet on
Why
America.
did it take you so fucking long to be? So maybe this is the issue. It's like guys like you who are smart, thoughtful, well-read, and actually really learn the topics instead of learning the buzzwords and like spitting them out there, which is great when you called out Nikki Haley. She couldn't even name the 3 provinces.
that she wants us to fight for.
And then she could, I mean, it was just a perfect example of she's not even nuanced on this issue at all. But what, you have to go make $1 billion in finance before you can go be in politics. Now, if you're in Turkey, you're working for Erdogan, you're probably making $10 billion because he's your boy, but he's got you on his hip like this guy's fucking good and we need to work. I'm not saying that we should adopt that system at all. That being said, how do we get more people that are like you to stop speculating and start working for the government?
So I'll tell you when I graduated from college, right? So I was in high school when the planes hit the Twin Towers. I was in Cincinnati. A lot of my peers, when they graduated from college or didn't even graduate from college, went and served this country in the military. I grew up in Cincinnati. My dad was facing layoffs at the GE plant in Evendale when Jack Welch was the CEO of GE, slashed about two-thirds of the people in the plant where he worked. He had to go to night school to keep job security. For me, when I graduated from college, Bill Gates gave the commencement address at Harvard, actually, when I was graduating in 2007. And I was really looking forward to it. This is the wealthiest man in the world at that time. I'm excited to, all right, tell us how it's done. And what we get is this like pathetic pre-canned speech about the importance of giving back. And I'm like, how the hell does one get the things to give back? You know, exactly. You skip that part of the speech, and I listened carefully, and you didn't tell me. But you know, I was unapologetically going to say, all right, I'm going to do it honestly, going to do it the right way through hard work, and hopefully creating valuable things. But I'm in this to get ahead as a capitalist. Yeah, and I don't regret that decision. But I think that there's a side to each of us that is also hungry to be part of something bigger than ourselves. So in each of us as an American, I think is the capitalist, but is the citizen too.
Oh, of course.
And so as long as I think we create the space for us to have, this gets super practical, but like that'd be the advice I'd give young people is don't think of your career as one thing. Think of it as like a storybook with a bunch of different chapters in it. And I think if we are sort of think about the structure of life in that sense, as opposed to right now, there's 3 chapters in life. One is education, then there's career, then there's retirement. Actually, one of the companies I founded, it's actually doing pretty well. It's in New York City. It's not far from here. It's actually doing really well. It's called Chapter. It was about that 3rd chapter in life, and it ended up getting into the Medicare plan selection space. It started with a grand vision of redefining the 3rd chapter, but ended up getting very practical, and the company's doing well. I've always had an interest in sort of redefining that 3-chapter model. And I think that will, in some ways as a cultural norm, help kind of make more normal the fact that you take 8 years to go serve your country, even if not in the front lines in Afghanistan, in the front lines of taking on a bureaucracy. And part of my best way to do that, to tell you, man, is through example. I mean, that's why I ran for president with the hope and expectation of being successful. And, if that's what the people of this country want and that's what, God's plan is, maybe I'll do that in the future. But I think that that's probably one of the best ways to actually do it is just by showing that it can be done.
It doesn't seem like you cut off your capital, you turned off your capitalist part or closed the capitalist chapter or whatever. But at what point were you like, because the thing you hear, and maybe you have so much money it doesn't even matter, but the thing you hear a lot is you keep, the fuck you number, the number that's enough money just keeps going up and up and up.
I think it's an illusion. It's an illusion at some point in time. I think
How did you realize that?
I think it was actually that 2020 year that did that for me. It was kind of a wake-up call. A lot of things happened. Karthik was born. I told you the story about, that experience that Apurva and I went through for those few months was a wake-up call for me. And then look at my son in the eye every day for those few months while she was on the front lines doing what she needed to do. And then it was a few months after that, 2 months after that, that the whole George Floyd thing played out, and the thing I talked about in Woke Inc., that, in my own company, there's weird stuff going on that I hadn't thought about across corporate America relating to this new ideology, that for me, the combination of those things happening in a very short period of time was kind of my call to action. And I think it probably organically takes everybody to have their own version of that, to really authentically doing it as opposed to just doing it by rote. But I also think that if we created a cultural norm of that, and I think this is something you don't want instilled from on high. You haven't gotten to the end of the book, but I play with the idea of mandatory service. When I say I agree with 95% of the things that are in there, I don't think that's actually the right answer, because once you mandate it, it loses the quality of actually being service. But I do think that's at the very least, doing it through inspiration, I think is something that is strictly positive. And that's what I hoped to achieve as the next president. I hope in some small measure we achieved that even through the campaign itself, but I'm not done. And so the answer to that question is important to me. And I don't have the clear answer other than agreeing with you that it needs to happen in this country. And the best way is it's always easy to force other people to do something. It's a lot harder to man up and step up and do it yourself. And so instead of pointing at how can we get a country where other people do it, maybe you just take a long, hard look in the mirror and ask yourself to maybe do what you demand of others. And that's what the last year was about for me. And I hope with some reflection, I haven't decided what I'm going to do next. I'm going to take some time on this one. You don't get dealt a blank slate very often, so I want to take full advantage of that. But whatever I do next, hopefully will be guided by that same spirit of wanting to practice what I preach a little bit. And so whatever that is, we'll see where it goes.
Vivek, I am, I'm very
Thank you
happy
guys
we got
for
to
having
sit
me,
down
man.
with you, man.
I'm
This
glad.
was
Thank you,
fucking
dudes.
great.
Yeah, appreciate it.
It's
Yeah.
good
I really enjoyed
to,
it.
it's good to use, I think, platforms like this where you get this long time to really
way better.
explain.
Yeah.
It's a tough game. It's a tough game, that politics. This 30-second sound bites trying to get everything out. But I'm really glad that you got to explain everything, because I feel like I understand your ethos way better.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
And I think I see it through those lenses. So thank you very much, guys. Give it up for Vivek Ramaswamy, future Vice President of the United States of America, maybe President one day.